Chapter 9:13. The three sovereigns attacked again. They did not stop and did not give Chu Fengmian any chance to attack. They wanted to take advantage of the situation and kill Chu Fengmian. The three sovereigns attacked again. The power that they unleashed was much more terrifying than the previous attack. Boom! The three forces merged into one in the air and turned into an extremely fast sword light. The appearance of the sword light caused the surrounding space to distort. This was the sword that represented the ultimate kill. Chu Fengmian could feel it. As long as the sword was going to kill Chu Fengmian would not be able to resist and would be killed immediately. All his fortunate encounters, his godly tree, even his battle dragon bloodline and his outstanding recovery ability were unable to resist the power of the slash. It was an earth-shattering sword. In the air, it was already attacking Chu Fengmian. Damn it, I can't hide anything anymore. Emperor Jar, out! Chu Fengmian's mind raced. At this moment, at this critical moment of life and death, Chu Fengmian could not hide anything anymore. The only thing he needed to do now was to survive. The only way to survive was to use the Emperor Jar. Bam! An ancient earthen jar suddenly appeared in Chu Fengmian's palm. This ancient earthen jar seemed to be in a dilapidated state. However, the moment this broken earthen jar appeared, it actually managed to disperse the spiritual energy that was crazily pressing towards them. In an instant, an extremely terrifying aura was emitted from the ancient jar. What is this? A heaven-grade spiritual weapon? No matter how powerful a spiritual weapon is, it can't possess such terrifying power. Seeing the ancient jar in Chu Fengmian's hand, Emperor Bao stared at it with his eyes wide open. Even with Emperor Bao's experience, it was his first time feeling such power. It was a power that was completely different from a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. No matter how powerful a heaven-grade spiritual weapon was, it was impossible for it to possess such power. An extreme path immortal weapon, it's an extreme path immortal weapon. Emperor Bao suddenly shouted after recovering from his shock. Retreat! What? An extreme path immortal weapon? This kid has an extreme immortal weapon. The Sky Emperor and Li Emperor didn't react for a moment, but after hearing Emperor Bao's words, they seemed to have suddenly reacted. In an instant, he hurriedly retreated. The legend of an extreme Dao celestial weapon had been circulating in the 9 regions for a long time. But just from the power emanating from the Emperor Jar, it was enough to see how terrifying the power of the Emperor Jar was. As for why Chu Fengmian had an extreme Dao immortal weapon, it was no longer their concern. Their minds were filled with thoughts of retreating and escaping. Trying to escape? When Chu Fengmian saw the 3 rulers retreating quickly, he could not help but sneer. All of you go to hell. Today, none of you can escape. As Chu Fengmian spoke, he poured all of his power into the mortal Emperor Jar. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian felt as if all the power in his body had been sucked out. However, the Emperor Jar was filled with spiritual power and suddenly began to vibrate. The ancient human emperor enlightened all living beings. Rumble! An extremely terrifying power was released from the Emperor Jar, turning into a shockwave. Although the 3 rulers retreated continuously, they were still enveloped by the power of the Emperor Jar in the next moment. Then, a series of explosions suddenly resounded. The explosions were densely packed. Emperor Bao's Million Treasures River was trying to resist the power of the Emperor Jar. However, even in the Million Treasures River, there were countless explosions. Countless spiritual weapons were blown up and destroyed on the spot. The Million Treasures River was full of holes from the explosions. Puff, puff. The 3 rulers spat out a large amount of blood essence from their mouth. However, this time, they didn't spit it out voluntarily by sacrificing their blood essence. Instead, under the power of the Emperor Jar, their internal organs were shattered. They couldn't resist it and spat out a large amount of blood essence. The amount of blood essence they spat out was much more than what they had sacrificed. It would take at least a few thousand years. Even if the three rulers cultivated bitterly for countless years, they wouldn't be able to take another step forward. It might even shake their realms and cause their realms to drop. This kind of injury was almost fatal. Just a little bit more and they would have all died in the Emperor Jar. Sword breaking the heavens and earth. Chu Fengmian didn't hesitate at all. Just as the power of the Emperor Jar disappeared, he suddenly moved and rushed over. The battle dragon bloodline in Chu Fengmian's body boiled endlessly. The power of fortune was added to Chu Fengmian's sword. He had used all of his trump cards. Kill you while you're down. For the three rulers, the injuries caused by the Emperor Jar were enough to recover more than half in a few breaths. However, Chu Fengmian didn't intend to give them this opportunity. This was the best opportunity for Chu Fengmian. He had to let Chen Xing chase after him. Chu Fengmian's figure rushed to the front of the Sky Emperor in an instant. The person he wanted to kill was still the Sky Emperor. The Sky Emperor's strength was the weakest, and he was the most severely affected by the Emperor Jar. Right now, the Sky Emperor's realm was somewhat unstable. It was even faintly showing signs of falling from the 7th step of the life and death steps to the refining heart realm. This was the best opportunity for Chu Fengmian. Breaking the firmament with a sword. Bang, 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 bang. Chu Fengmian's sword emitted a dazzling sword light that soared into the sky. Within this sword light, one could even hear the roar of a dragon. This time, it was Chu Fengmian's turn to kill. Damn it! Void of heaven and earth. When the Sky Emperor saw Chu Fengmian appearing in front of him in an instant, his face revealed a bit of panic. He suddenly activated his spiritual energy. His body merged with the surrounding space, as if he had become one with the surrounding space. He wanted to use this to dodge Chu Fengmian's sword light. However, this was already impossible. Chu Fengmian's eyes were still incomparably cold when he saw this. It was impossible to escape from his sword. In this world, no one could escape from his sword. Destroy! Chu Fengmian's sword fell. The space around the Sky Emperor was shrouded by the sword and shattered on the spot. Breaking the firmament with a sword. Even the firmament would be broken, let alone the surrounding space. The surrounding space, along with the Sky Emperor's body, was directly shattered under Chu Fengmian's sword. Only a cloud of blood was left in the air. Chapter 9:14. The Sky Emperor was a peerless sovereign. But now, he was killed by Chu Fengmian. He was crushed by Chu Fengmian's sword, leaving behind only his essence, blood and bones. Now, three sovereigns surrounded Chu Fengmian, but Chu Fengmian did not die. Instead, he killed one of the sovereigns. It was earth-shattering. Even if this matter was spread out, no one in the entire 9 regions would believe it. Devour! Chu Fengmian waved his hand and the Sky Emperor's essence blood was devoured by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian did not refine it, but kept it in his body. All of it came to the front of the divine tree and was devoured by it. The Sky Emperor's essence blood was much purer than the essence blood of Battle Demon Supremacy, Lone Demon Supremacy and the others. After the divine tree devoured the Sky Emperor's essence blood, a warm energy flowed into Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian could feel that the branches of the divine tree had become much tougher after devouring the Sky Emperor's essence blood. The injuries that Yangming suffered when he resisted the 3 rulers earlier had completely recovered. In fact, he was much more tenacious than before. After killing the Sky Emperor, Chu Fengmian's losses were all paid back. Finally, Chu Fengmian was able to catch his breath. The Sky Emperor is dead. Damn it, how could this kid be so terrifying? An extreme immortal weapon, such a legendary item, to think it would appear in this kid's hands. Emperor Li and Emperor Bao looked at Chu Fengmian with murderous eyes. The 3 of them joined forces, but Chu Fengmian found the opportunity to kill them. They even lost one of them. It was definitely a great loss. This kid has countless trump cards, and he's getting more and more courageous under the pressure. We have to kill him directly. Otherwise, we won't be able to kill him today. Emperor Bao shouted angrily. The energy in his body was rising crazily. At this moment, 3 incomparably huge vortexes appeared behind him. Inside the vortexes, there were countless spiritual stones and mysterious items that were constantly burning in the vortexes. Thus, the endless power was added to Emperor Bao's body. Emperor Bao had already burned up all his wealth and turned it into his strength, fusing it into the wind of his fist. Boom! Just as Emperor Bao's fist was about to reach its peak, it suddenly landed. The target of this punch was Chu Fengmian. He didn't want to give Chu Fengmian any more chances. He wanted to kill Chu Fengmian with this punch. Even if he had to go bankrupt today, he must kill Chu Fengmian. It was the same for Emperor Li, who unleashed all the power in his body and attacked at the same time. Even Sovereign Ning, who had been fighting with Luo Shi, turned around at this moment and launched a killing blow at Chu Fengmian. The last time the 3 kings attacked, Chu Fengmian had used the power of the Emperor Jar. But this time, Chu Fengmian no longer had any trump cards to use. If that's the case, then let's fight. Even if Chu Fengmian dies, he must die in battle. Chu Fengmian roared. Fight! Fight to the death! Roar! 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 From behind Chu Fengmian, dragon roars suddenly resounded. Even the battle dragon bloodline in Chu Fengmian's body was roaring, wanting to fight Chu Fengmian. The ancient battle dragon could only die in battle one day. No matter how strong the enemy was, he must fight to the end. In an instant, 66,000 drops of ancient battle dragon blood essence were boiling in Chu Fengmian's body. It caused Chu Fengmian's body to suddenly grow countless scales, gradually changing, causing Chu Fengmian to turn into an ancient battle dragon on the spot. The power of the battle dragon's skill had reached its peak. Only by fighting to the death could the power of the battle dragon's skill be fully displayed. It was an ancient war dragon that was over 10,000 meters long. It suddenly roared and soared into the sky. With his body, he forcibly resisted the attack of the 3 sovereigns. Fight! 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 The ancient battle dragon roared crazily, shouting the word "fight" one after another. This represented Chu Fengmian's belief. The dragon's scales on his body began to shatter in the face of the bombardment of the 3 sovereigns' power. However, the shattered dragon's scales gradually formed a crystal-clear appearance. A flawless body. Chu Fengmian's body was transforming into a flawless body. The 4th step of the life and death steps, the flawless state, was to transform one's body into a flawless one. At this critical moment, Chu Fengmian's realm was even being promoted and broken through. Great! Chu Fengmian could also see that his body was about to change in the face of this life and death battle, and his realm was about to break through. Only in this kind of life and death battle could one's potential be truly stimulated. Therefore, when dealing with a peerless genius, if one could not kill him in one go, one could only let him fight more bravely. Break for me! Battle dragon dance in the heavens! Chu Fengmian roared in the air. From his side, his dragon scales all turned into the appearance of ancient battle dragons in the air. At this moment, tens of thousands of ancient battle dragons roared and soared into the sky. The dragons danced. He forcibly withstood the power of the 3 sovereigns. Fortunately, I just killed the Sky Emperor and recovered my strength, so they can't join forces. Otherwise, I'll definitely die if the 4 sovereigns join forces. Chu Fengmian heaved a sigh of relief in his heart after withstanding the power. Just now, Chu Fengmian's power was about to be broken at any moment. Once his power was broken, Chu Fengmian would definitely die. Fortunately, the Sky Emperor did not join forces. Otherwise, even if Chu Fengmian really broke through and reached the flawless state, he would still be killed in the end. I have to go. I've used all my trump cards, and even my potential has been forced out. If this goes on, I'll die sooner or later. Chu Fengmian quickly thought of a way out. If they continued to fight to the death, even a real primordial war dragon would die in battle. Luo Shi, let's join forces and break out together. Chu Fengmian quietly sent a message to Luo Shi with his divine thought. At this time, only Luo Shi could join forces with Chu Fengmian. Luo Shi's strength was not inferior to an ordinary sovereign. If the two of them joined forces, there was a chance that they could break out. Alright, let's go. In an instant, Luo Shi's divine thought was sent over. Almost without any hesitation, Luo Shi and Chu Fengmian's figures flew out together. They directly flew above the Yantian Lake. As long as they left the Yantian Lake, they would be free to fly. As long as they hid in one place, even the three sovereigns would not be able to find them. Chapter 9:15. Oh no, they're leaving. The attack just now had consumed more than half of the power of the three emperors present. Just as they recovered their power, they suddenly sensed that Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi were about to rush out of the Flame Heaven Lake. Once they left the Flame Heaven Lake, as long as the two of them hid in the vast House of Storms, the three emperors would not be able to find them. In this way, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to catch them all in one fell swoop would be completely wasted. Emperor Li, attack! Emperor Bao shouted loudly. At this point, they no longer cared about the treasures and spiritual weapons on Chu Fengmian. As long as they killed Chu Fengmian, that was the most important thing. Realm-dividing bead. Retrieve. The seven-colored bead suddenly appeared in Emperor Li's palm. Immediately, the seven-colored light around them disappeared. The three emperors took the lead and flew to the top of the Flame Heaven Lake along with the seven-colored light. Countless restrictions were suddenly set up on the Flame Heaven Lake. An inescapable net made it impossible for people to leave the Flame Heaven Lake. Damn it! Chu Fengmian cursed secretly. Without the protection of the seven-colored light, the heavenly fire in the Flame Heaven Lake had already surged toward Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi. Even spiritual power found it difficult to resist the heavenly fire. No matter how tough Chu Fengmian's body was, he could only be burned into charcoal in the heavenly fire. Emperor Li was ruthless enough. He would rather not have any of Chu Fengmian's spiritual weapons. Today, he would kill Chu Fengmian in the Flame Heaven Lake. An inescapable net had been set up on the Flame Heaven Lake. It was obvious that they had been prepared long ago. It seemed that the three emperors had been prepared beforehand. If they could not kill him on the spot, they would use the Flame Heaven Lake to do so. Compared to the three emperors, the heavenly fire in the Flame Heaven Lake was even more terrifying. As long as I get out alive today, I'll definitely kill these three people. Chu Fengmian shouted angrily in his heart. Almost no one had ever forced Chu Fengmian into such a hopeless situation. As long as Chu Fengmian could leave alive today, he would definitely kill all three of them. Not good, the heavenly fire is about to sweep over. Let's rush out quickly. Luo Shi shouted anxiously from the side. The heavenly fire was already approaching the two of them. Chu Fengmian could feel the heavenly fire burning his cheeks. Under this kind of roasting, even a ruler would not be able to hold on for more than a minute and would be completely burned. Let's resist the surrounding heavenly fire first before making any further plans. Sword Emperor Palace. With a thought, Chu Fengmian summoned the Sword Sovereign Palace and sucked Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi into it. This was Beimang Palace. This brat actually brought the Northern Mang Palace out of the Northern Mang Academy? Above the Blaze Heaven Lake, Emperor Bao, Emperor Li, and Emperor Ning were looking at Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi. Seeing Chu Fengmian take out the Sword Emperor Palace, their eyes revealed a bit of surprise. However, most of them were sneers. So what if you have the Northern Mang Palace? It's impossible for a heaven-grade spirit artifact to withstand the heavenly fire in the Flame Heaven Lake. It's just a futile struggle. Emperor Bao's eyes were filled with pride. After setting up the trap for such a long time, it was just the right time to capture Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi in one fell swoop. Originally, they were only prepared to deal with Luo Shi alone, but they did not expect to encounter Chu Fengmian along the way, killing two birds with one stone. However, thinking of this, Emperor Bao's eyes revealed a bit of haze. In order to kill Chu Fengmian, The Sky Emperor had to die here. He had to pay the price of an emperor to kill Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi. However, as long as they could kill Chu Fengmian, it was worth it to pay such a huge price. It's just a pity that Chu Fengmian's countless spirit artifacts and the extreme-grade immortal weapon are completely destroyed. Emperor Li's eyes revealed a bit of pity. Chu Fengmian had countless opportunities on him, including the ancestral dragon supreme sword, the battle dragon treasure carriage, and the emperor jar that he just revealed. Now that Chu Fengmian had died in the Flame Heaven Lake, all of his spirit artifacts would be buried with him. Even if the emperor jar could withstand the roasting of the flames, it would eventually fall to the bottom of the Flame Heaven Lake. No matter how powerful a martial artist was, it was impossible to reclaim the Flame Heaven Lake. It's indeed a pity that the charming demon Sovereign died before we could enjoy her. Sovereign Ning licked the corner of his mouth. He had always desired Luo Shi, and now that Luo Shi had died in the Flame Heaven Lake, it was a pity for him. These three figures had been standing on the Flame Heaven Lake, sealing off the top of the Flame Heaven Lake. Even if Chu Fengmian wanted to rush out, it was impossible. In the Sword Sovereign Palace, Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi came to the Sword Sovereign Palace, finally escaping the roasting of the heavenly fire. They finally let out a sigh of relief. However, Chu Fengmian knew that this was only temporary. Even the Sword Sovereign Palace could not withstand the heavenly fire for too long. Yunjian, can you withstand it? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked. No, young master. I can only withstand the heavenly fire for 2 minutes at most. Yunjian's voice was heard after a while, and there was a hint of anxiety in his voice. Even the Sword Sovereign Palace could not withstand the heavenly fire for too long. 2 minutes. Hearing this, Luo Shi's face revealed a hint of joy, but now it completely disappeared. The Sword Sovereign Palace could only withstand it for 2 minutes. As long as these 2 minutes passed, she and Chu Fengmian would still die in the Flame Heaven Lake. The top of the Flame Heaven Lake has been sealed off by the three sovereigns. We can't break out. Chu Fengmian opened his spiritual consciousness and observed the Flame Heaven Lake. Above the Flame Heaven Lake, there was an inescapable net formed by spiritual energy. If Chu Fengmian entered it, he would only be courting death. There was no way he could break out. In this desperate situation, I can only fight for a chance of survival. Chu Fengmian thought of thousands of countermeasures in an instant, but only one had a chance of survival. Yunjian, go to the bottom of the Flame Heaven Lake, Chu Fengmian said decisively. Even now, Chu Fengmian could feel that there was something at the bottom of the Flame Heaven Lake that was attracting him. This feeling could not be wrong. Clearly, there was another world at the bottom of the Flame Heaven Lake that was attracting Chu Fengmian. In this situation, he could only fight to the death and go to the bottom of the Flame Heaven Lake. The bottom of the Flame Heaven Lake was the place where the heavenly fire was the most terrifying. The ninefold heavenly fire was the most terrifying pure yang heavenly fire at the bottom of the Flame Heaven Lake. Going to the bottom of the Flame Heaven Lake was no different from a dead end, but it was precisely this dead end that Chu Fengmian had to take. Chapter 9:16. In the Flame Heavenly Lake. The Sword Sovereign Palace was flying towards the bottom of the Flame Heavenly Lake at its fastest speed. The surrounding heavenly fire also gradually began to change color. Its power was countless times more terrifying than the heavenly fire just now. Each of the 9 layers of heavenly fire was more terrifying than the previous one. Even the first layer of heavenly fire couldn't be resisted by ordinary sovereigns. Not to mention the depths of the Flame Heavenly Lake. Sure enough, Chu Fengmian had been searching for this feeling in the Sword Sovereign Palace. The closer he got to the bottom of the Flame Heavenly Lake, the more Chu Fengmian could feel the attraction. Chu Fengmian's judgment was right. There must be something hidden under the Flame Heavenly Lake. The Sword Sovereign Palace was still flying. Now, the Sword Sovereign Palace could no longer resist the heavenly fire. Chu Fengmian, who was in the Sword Sovereign Palace, could feel the terrifying temperature. Here, Chu Fengmian would be roasted to death by the heavenly fire in less than 3 breaths of time after leaving the Sword Sovereign Palace. Here we are. Chu Fengmian felt that the heat of the heavenly fire had reached the extreme. This was the bottom of the flame heavenly lake. The flames at the bottom of the flame heavenly lake had lost their color. This represented the most terrifying pure yang heavenly fire among the 9 layers of heavenly fire. The colorless flame, pure yang heavenly fire. Chu Fengmian's expression was also extremely nervous. Here, even the Sword Sovereign Palace could only hold on for 10 breaths of time at most. If Chu Fengmian wanted to find the secret of the flame heavenly lake, he had to do it within these 10 breaths of time. His spiritual consciousness scanned the bottom of the flame heavenly lake. Suddenly, a restriction appeared in front of Chu Fengmian's eyes at the bottom of the flame heavenly lake. There's actually such a restriction at the bottom of the flame heavenly lake? Chu Fengmian sensed that the restriction was located at the bottom of the flame heavenly lake, but the surrounding pure yang heavenly fire didn't burn it. Obviously, the owner of the restriction was the owner of the flame heavenly lake, Venerable Kanglan. Venerable Kanglan actually left such a restriction at the bottom of the flame heavenly lake. There must be other secrets behind this restriction. Chu Fengmian could feel that the attraction to him was coming from behind the restriction. Break this restriction. Chu Fengmian made a decision without hesitation. Chu Fengmian, what do you want to do? Luo Shi also noticed the change in Chu Fengmian. She didn't know how Chu Fengmian had detected the restriction at the bottom of the flame heavenly lake. But now this was his only chance. Leave the Sword Emperor Palace and break this restriction. After Chu Fengmian finished speaking, he left the Sword Emperor Palace. Chu Fengmian's body fell into the flame heavenly lake, and he immediately felt the terrifying pure yang heavenly flame around him. The scorching pure yang heavenly fire was about to burn Chu Fengmian to ashes. Chu Fengmian hurriedly spread out his spiritual energy. He could also feel that his body was being eroded at every moment. Suddenly, another figure appeared beside Chu Fengmian. Luo Shi also left the Sword Emperor Palace and followed Chu Fengmian to the Flame Heaven Lake. She also felt the heat of the heavenly fire around her and hurriedly spread out her spiritual power. I'll help you. You attack the restriction, and I'll resist the pure yang heavenly fire. Without batting an eyelid, Luo Shi unleashed all of the spiritual energy in her body, transforming it into a barrier that enveloped both her and Chu Fengmian's body. At the bottom of the flame heavenly lake, even protecting oneself was an extremely difficult task, let alone protecting others. Luo Shi's spiritual power spread out and she was under great pressure. Her face turned red. I can only hold on for 3 breaths. Hurry! Without waiting for Luo Shi to speak, Chu Fengmian had already unsheathed his sword. His natal sword origin and the power of creation were all integrated into the sword. Suddenly, the sword slashed towards the seal. Boom! When the sword struck the restriction, it suddenly shook, but only a few cracks appeared. This sword strike that contained the power of creation was unable to break the restriction. Sword break the firmament. Sword dance across the sky. Battle Dragon Claw. Invincible King's Fist. In an instant, Chu Fengmian didn't know how many martial techniques and sword lights he had used. All of them bombarded the restriction. These waves of power made the restriction crack continuously, but it still couldn't break. Hurry! Hurry up! Break it quickly! Large beads of sweat kept falling from Chu Fengmian's forehead. In this Yen Tian Lake, he suffered incomparably huge injuries at almost every moment. Luo Shi, who was beside Chu Fengmian, was in the same situation. Her body was constantly being eroded by the heavenly fire, and she was about to die. Go back to the Sword Emperor Palace first. Chu Fengmian didn't hesitate. He waved his hand and took Luo Shi back to the Sword Emperor Palace. At this time, the heavenly fire that Luo Shi had been resisting beside Chu Fengmian all this time burned toward Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's body was gradually scorched and burned crazily. ancient human emperor, enlighten all living beings. Chu Fengmian suddenly spat out a large mouthful of essence blood. It burned crazily and activated the power of the Emperor Jar again. Chu Fengmian had been able to activate the power of the Emperor Jar for several days, so he could only activate it once. If he wanted to activate it again, he would have to pay a great price. But at this moment Chu Fengmian didn't care about the price. He burned his essence blood crazily to activate the power of the Emperor Jar. Suddenly, the power of the Emperor Jar burst out from the bottom of the flame heavenly lake. Boom! Boom! Countless explosions erupted from the restrictive formation. Crack! Suddenly, a loud noise rang out. This restriction was finally broken by the power of the Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian's body grabbed the sword Emperor Palace and rushed into the restriction almost instantly. Like a fireball, he fell into a palace. This palace was at the bottom of the flame heavenly lake. No heavenly fire could enter through the entrance of the restriction. It was like a completely different world. Chu Fengmian, how are you? In the Sword Emperor Palace, Luo Shi's figure appeared. She saw Chu Fengmian lying on the ground, unable to move. Chu Fengmian was now on the verge of death. His body had been completely burned by the heavenly fire. Even with the bloodline of the War Dragon, it was difficult to repair it. Once again, he forcibly activated the power of the Emperor Jar, causing Chu Fengmian's internal organs to shake and shatter countless times. Now, even if Chu Fengmian wasn't a dead man, he was not far from death. Chapter 9:17. Fortunately, at least I managed to escape. Chu Fengmian lay on the ground, unable to move. He was already wholeheartedly circulating the power of the Battle Dragon will in an attempt to heal the injuries on his body. The Battle Dragon bloodline's amazing recovery power was gradually healing Chu Fengmian's body and slowly dissolving his injuries. It should be fine. As long as I don't die, my injuries can be healed, Chu Fengmian said slowly. However, before he could finish his sentence, he spat out a mouthful of blood essence from his mouth. His pale face made him look even more miserable. How are you? Luo Shi looked a little nervous. She hurriedly injected spiritual energy into Chu Fengmian's body. At the same time, spiritual pills appeared in her palm and were all swallowed by Chu Fengmian. However, the medicinal power of these spiritual pills could not heal Chu Fengmian's injuries. Oh no, your 5 viscera and 6 bowels have been corroded by the heavenly fire. No spiritual pills will be able to heal your body now. Luo Shi checked Chu Fengmian's body and said anxiously. With Chu Fengmian's current injuries, if it were any other warrior, they would have died long ago. Only Chu Fengmian, with his terrifying vitality, could still survive. However, Chu Fengmian only had 1 breath left. Chu Fengmian was still being corroded by the pure yang heavenly fire at every moment. After a while, Chu Fengmian would be burned by the heavenly fire sooner or later. Unless he fully recovers his spiritual energy at this time, he can get rid of the heavenly fire in his body. But how can he do it now? Luo Shi looked at Chu Fengmian, who was almost unconscious, and couldn't help but mutter to herself. How could he fully recover his spiritual energy when he was seriously injured? It seemed like a simple method, but in reality, it was completely useless. No, it wasn't that there was no way. Luo Shi had another way. Divine Charm in Body. It was the most miraculous innate divine body. Whoever could obtain the Divine Charm in Body for the first time would gain great benefit. Luo Shi was able to become the lord of the Charm Demon tribe because of her Divine Charm in Body. In the 6 demon sects, Luo Shi was not only the lord of the Charm Demon tribe, but also the Demon Emperor's fiancée. She was waiting for the Demon Emperor to break through to the heavenly fate realm so that she could marry him. He's in this situation because of me. Luo Shi looked at Chu Fengmian and muttered. If Chu Fengmian didn't save her, she would have died in the sea of fire. The heavenly fire, heavenly fire. Thinking of this, Luo Shi's cheeks couldn't help but blush. Perhaps Luo Shi had already fallen in love with Chu Fengmian. After a long moment of hesitation, Luo Shi's eyes were filled with determination. She suddenly took off her clothes, revealing her enchanting body. The clothes on Chu Fengmian's body were all taken off, and the two bodies were entangled together in the palace. Tu to Luo tu to Chu to be to God die. After a long time, Chu Fengmian, who was lying on the ground, slowly opened his eyes. He had fainted under the corrosion of the heavenly fire. I'm not dead yet? Chu Fengmian had a premonition that he was going to die when he fainted. The corrosion of the heavenly fire had reached Chu Fengmian's 5 viscera and 6 bowels. No matter how strong Chu Fengmian's vitality was, he would still die. But now Chu Fengmian had regained consciousness. Moreover, the pain of being burned by the heavenly fire had disappeared from Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian's aura was even stronger than before. What's going on? Chu Fengmian scanned Chu Fengmian's body with his spiritual consciousness. His eyes were filled with disbelief. His body had already completely recovered. Originally, it was extremely serious and impossible to recover from the injuries, but now all of them had been completely healed. Even the heavenly fire, which was the most difficult to deal with, had recovered. It was unbelievable. The heavenly fire could only be dispelled by Chu Fengmian's full strength. But now all of it had been dispelled while Chu Fengmian was unconscious. Even Chu Fengmian's realm had jumped 2 levels, reaching the 5th level of life and death realm, the divine martial realm. What's going on? My body? No, this power is? In Chu Fengmian's mind, he suddenly recalled the scene of 2 people making love. This scene was like a dream, but now it was incomparably clear. It's Luo Shi. Luo Shi was the only one in the palace, and only her mesmerizing divine body was capable of doing this. Chu Fengmian suddenly sat up from the ground. Only then did he notice the naked figure beside him. The moment Chu Fengmian woke up, Luo Shi, who had been lying beside him, also opened her eyes. Seeing her naked body, she couldn't help but blush. A surge of spiritual power condensed into a long gown, covering her beautiful body once again. I didn't expect you to be the one who saved me. Chu Fengmian looked at Luo Shi with an unnatural expression. He didn't expect Luo Shi to save him at this time, and in such a way to save him. Thinking of the lingering feelings in the dream, Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed an unnatural expression. It seems that your injuries have all healed. Luo Shi saw that Chu Fengmian had woken up, and joy appeared in her eyes. But soon, her joy was suppressed, and she revealed a somewhat calm expression. This time, it's because of me that you fell into such a dangerous situation. This time we're even. We don't owe each other anything. This time, after leaving the House of Storms, I'll return to the 6 Paths Demonic Gate. From now on, we'll have nothing to do with each other. Luo Shi sighed and said. She was the fiancée of the Demon Emperor. It could be said that the Demon Emperor was the reason why she could become the Lord of Succubus Demon. Now that she was naked with Chu Fengmian, her charming divine body was crippled. If she returned to the 6 Paths Demonic Gate, it would be a disaster. Today's matter would be completely over. From now on, they would have nothing to do with each other. It's very dangerous for you to return to the 6 Paths Demonic Gate now. Chu Fengmian looked at Luo Shi and said slowly. There's no other way. Apart from the 6 Paths Demonic Gate, I have nowhere else to go. Luo Shi's expression revealed a hint of sadness. She grew up in the 6 Paths Demonic Gate. If she left the 6 Paths Demonic Gate, where could she go? Come with me. Chu Fengmian looked at Luo Shi and suddenly said. Chapter 9:18. Come with me. Chu Fengmian's words were like a clap of thunder that exploded in Luo Shi's mind. What did you say? Luo Shi couldn't hide the shock on her face. She didn't expect Chu Fengmian to say something like that. Luo Shi was highly sought after in the 6 Paths Demon Sect. She even became the lord of the charming demon sect. However, all of this was because of her divine body of charming Een. No matter how magical the divine body of charming Een was, it would only be useful for the first time. It would be meaningless once it was used on someone else. It could be said that the Six Paths demon sex nurtured Luo Shi as a cultivation vessel for the demon emperor. Without the divine body of charming Een, Luo Shi would be meaningless. If she were to return to the Six Paths demon sex after being used by Chu Fengmian, she would be demoted to a slave even if she didn't die. However, she had no other choice. Without the divine body of charming Een, she wouldn't be accepted no matter which faction she went to. This was because Luo Shi's identity was a huge problem in itself. Anyone who chose to be with her would be hunted down by the Six Paths demon sect. Even Chu Fengmian might not want this burden. "Come with me and be my woman," Chu Fengmian said calmly. He looked at Luo Shi. "You're my woman now. Don't even think about leaving and returning to the Six Paths demon sect." Luo Shi looked at Chu Fengmian and remained silent for a long time. She was forced to be with Chu Fengmian. However, at that time she didn't care about anything else. In the end, she still saved Chu Fengmian. From the bottom of her heart, she still liked Chu Fengmian. At that critical moment, he chose to save her. Even if it was the Devil Emperor, at such a critical moment, he would probably abandon her and leave instead of saving her. "All right." Luo Shi was silent for a while before she nodded gently. Her cheeks blushed again. "Let's go and see what treasures there are in this palace." Chu Fengmian laughed. A drop of golden blood suddenly flew out from his fingertip and fell into Luo Shi's body. "This is a drop of my life essence blood. If you're in danger, it can protect you. You can also find me through it at any time." This drop of golden blood fused with Luo Shi's body, causing her power to increase even further. At the same time, Luo Shi could feel that this drop of golden blood was by her side. It represented Chu Fengmian and had always been protecting her. "Let's go and see what the treasures of the House of Storms are." Chu Fengmian picked up Luo Shi, and his body flashed as he walked into the inner part of the palace. Inside the palace, one could see an incomparably huge rock at a glance. This rock was crystal clear in color. It was dozens of miles long and wide, making it extremely huge. An incomparably pure spiritual energy was constantly being emitted from the rock. "Is this a saint-grade spirit stone?" "Such a large piece is actually a saint-grade spirit stone?" Luo Shi glanced at the rock and her eyes almost popped out of their socket. This huge rock was actually a saint-grade spirit stone. It was incomparably large. This piece of saint-grade spirit stone could be exchanged for a huge amount of wealth. It was almost unimaginable. It was simply an astronomical figure. In the outside world, a small piece of saint-grade spirit stone was enough to cause countless patriarchs and even sovereigns to fight over it. Even in the ancient cavern, there were very few saint-grade spirit stones that could be found. But in the House of Storms there was actually such a huge piece of saint-grade spirit stone. "It seems that this is indeed the treasure left behind by Venerable Kanglin," Chu Fengmian said. Such a large piece of saint-grade spirit stone could only be owned by someone like Venerable Kanglin who had already become an immortal. "There's something on this saint-grade spirit stone?" Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he looked at the saint-grade spirit stone. Suddenly, his figure moved and arrived on top of the saint-grade spirit stone. On top of the saint-grade spirit stone, there was a green-blue armor. Kanglin immortal armor? Chu Fengmian had just grabbed the cyan armor when a piece of memory suddenly appeared in his mind. It was the story of Venerable Kanglin who wore the Kanglin immortal armor and roamed the 9 regions. Later on, when Venerable Kanglin became invincible, the Kanglin immortal armor had been left in the House of Storms. This is actually Venerable Kanglin's protective armor. Chu Fengmian gasped. The Kanglin immortal armor was simply a spiritual weapon that was even more powerful than the ancestral dragon supreme sword and the war dragon treasure chariot. Even Dragon Emperor Yen paled in comparison to Venerable Kanglin. Dragon Emperor Yen and Chu Fengmian's master, the master of Sword Tao, were both at the peak of the 9 regions. But they were not invincible in the world. Because of this, the master of Sword Tao was besieged and killed by countless experts of the 7 major sections. Venerable Kanglin was truly invincible in the world. In that era, he looked down on everyone and was called Venerable Immortal. His protective armor was definitely a heaven-grade spirit artifact that had reached the pinnacle. It was not at the level of an extreme-grade immortal weapon, but it was definitely the most powerful heaven-grade spiritual weapon. Even an attack from an emperor couldn't shake it. Chu Fengmian recalled that when Venerable Kanglin was just an emperor, he was besieged by hundreds of emperors. He wore the Kanglin immortal armor and looked down on everyone. The full-force attack of an emperor bombarded the Kanglin immortal armor, but it was not damaged at all. Even an emperor couldn't shake this Kanglin immortal armor. It's really terrifying. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh. The treasures left behind by immortal Venerable Kanglin were absolutely not ordinary. Whether it was the ridiculously large saint-grade spiritual stone or the Kanglin immortal armor. If it was placed in the 9 regions, even the supreme old ancestors of the 7 major sects wouldn't be able to resist snatching it. It seemed that the rumor about the treasure in the House of Storms was true. It really did exist. But no one would have thought that the treasure would be hidden at the bottom of the flame heavenly lake. One should know that even a supreme old ancestor would not dare to go deep into the flame heavenly lake. If they were not careful, they would fall here. It was no wonder that no cultivator could find it even after it opened dozens of times. Under this coincidence, it was coincidentally obtained by Chu Fengmian. It could only be considered Chu Fengmian's luck. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and put the Kanglin immortal armor into his spatial ring. Chu Fengmian still hadn't figured out how to arrange the Kanglin immortal armor. Moreover, the treasures in the House of Storms were obviously not limited to this. There would be better treasures waiting for Chu Fengmian later. Chapter 9:19. As for this large piece of Saint-grade spirit stone, Chu Fengmian glanced at the Saint-grade spirit stone and suddenly unsheathed the ancestral dragon's supreme sword. He suddenly swung the sword and slashed at the center of the Saint-grade spirit stone. Immediately, a large piece of Saint-grade spiritual stone was split into 2 from the center. The Saint-grade spirit stone on this side is yours. Chu Fengmian looked at Luo Shi and said. At the same time, he opened the empty ring and put half of the Saint-grade spirit stone into it. Even with Chu Fengmian's divine pulse, it would take him several months to condense such a huge Saint-grade spirit stone. It was definitely a big fortune for Chu Fengmian. If Chu Fengmian hadn't just broken through and his foundation wasn't stable, he could immediately refine this Saint-grade spirit stone and break through again. You're giving the other half to me? You don't have to share the treasure with me. After all, you're the only one who found it. Luo Shi said hesitantly. You came to the House of Storms for Master Immortal Kanglin's treasure, right? Moreover, you're about to break through to the heavenly mandate realm. These spirit stones are useful to you. Chu Fengmian said casually. He ignored Luo Shi and walked directly into the House of Storms. Luo Shi looked at Chu Fengmian's departing figure and sighed helplessly. She put the other half of the Saint-grade spirit stone into the empty ring and quickly chased after him. The treasure of the House of Storms was obviously more than that. The feeling that had always attracted Chu Fengmian was not far away from here. Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi gradually walked into the depths of the palace. At a glance, Chu Fengmian saw another huge rock. It was another rock like a mountain. However, this rock wasn't a spirit stone. Sky crystal. This is a sky crystal. How can there be such a huge sky crystal? The moment Chu Fengmian saw the rock, he suddenly cried out. He was countless times more surprised than when he saw the Saint-grade spirit stone. Sky crystal. This was a strange object with the purest spiritual energy in the 9 regions. It was enough to purify and strengthen a martial artist's body. Back in Beimang City's black market, Chu Fengmian had obtained a sky crystal the size of a fingernail. At that time, Chu Fengmian's body had been strengthened to an unimaginable level. Back then, the heaven crystal was only the size of a fingernail. However, the heaven crystal before him was the size of a mountain. It wasn't smaller than the spirit stone that Chu Fengmian had seen. Sky crystal? This is the legendary sky crystal? Luo Shi followed Chu Fengmian in. She didn't have much of a reaction when she saw the rock-sized sky crystal. However, when she heard Chu Fengmian's words, she couldn't help but open her mouth wide in shock. The sky crystal was a legendary item in the 9 regions. Among the countless items in the universe, it was considered extremely rare. Luo crystal, spirit stone crystal. Now, such a huge rock was actually an entire piece of sky crystal? A sky crystal the size of a fingernail was enough to cause countless experts to fight over it in the 9 regions. Yet, this sky crystal was as big as a mountain? Luo Shi felt a little dizzy. The treasures left behind by venerable immortal Kanglin were truly terrifying. They appeared one after another, causing people to faint from shock. That's right, it's a sky crystal. Chu Fengmian nodded. His tone was very sure. Compared to other people who had only heard of sky crystals, Chu Fengmian had obtained one and refined it, allowing his body to be close to perfection. Therefore, Chu Fengmian would never mistake this sky crystal. Such a piece of sky crystal is probably enough to strengthen my current body to the point of perfection. My body is already supported by the divine tree and is incomparably tough. If I add this sky crystal... Chu Fengmian was extremely excited. When he was fighting with the 4 rulers, he was able to resolve the crisis time and time again because of Chu Fengmian's powerful physical body. At that time, if Chu Fengmian didn't rely on the strength of his body, who knew how many times he would have died? As long as his physical body was strong enough, even if Chu Fengmian encountered a Wushang Great Ancestor, the Wushang Great Ancestor would not be able to kill Chu Fengmian. It would be enough for Chu Fengmian to escape unscathed. Star crystal? How can there be such a large piece of star crystal? Just as Chu Fengmian was in shock, Xing Xian's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Xing Xian, who had been sleeping, suddenly woke up the moment he sensed the aura of such a large piece of sky crystal. It's impossible for such a huge piece of star crystal to enter the 9 regions. It's impossible to find such a large piece of star crystal in the entire 9 regions. Xing Xian couldn't help but mutter in Chu Fengmian's mind. Suddenly he asked, "Where is this place?" "The House of Storms." Chu Fengmian did not expect that the star crystal would actually force Xing Xian to wake up. One should know that Xing Xian had been sleeping most of the time. Even when Chu Fengmian encountered an incomparably huge crisis, he did not wake up. Now, he suddenly woke up because of this piece of sky crystal. The House of Storms? Venerable immortal Kanglin? Such a large piece of star crystal. This person must have left the 9 regions. Xing Xian muttered to himself. There are only a few people who have truly left the 9 regions. Who exactly is this person? Xing Xian's voice became softer and softer. Even Chu Fengmian could not hear his words clearly. Don't refine this piece of star crystal yet. Put it away first. Xing Xian's voice disappeared again after leaving these words. Although Chu Fengmian did not know what had happened to Xing Xian, he still put away the sky crystal according to Xing Xian's word. Xing Xian had always been a mysterious guy. Even now, Chu Fengmian could not figure out Xing Xian's origin. This confirmed Chu Fengmian's guess that Xing Xian must have come from outside the 9 regions. This sky crystal was also an item from outside the 9 regions. Such a large piece of sky crystal was definitely not from the 9 regions. The only explanation was that venerable immortal Kanglin had left the 9 regions to explore the extraterritorial realm. That was how he obtained such a huge piece of sky crystal. The mysterious extraterritorial realm. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh. The extraterritorial realm had always been the object of countless legends. Chu Fengmian also yearned for it. He also wanted to leave the 9 regions one day and explore the mysterious extraterritorial realm. However, Chu Fengmian's current strength was far from enough. Only with sufficient strength would he have a chance to walk out of the 9 regions in the future. Chapter 920. Originally, Chu Fengmian wanted to refine the sky crystal directly. However, thinking of Xing Xian's words, Chu Fengmian put the sky crystal into his empty ring. Now that such a large piece of sky crystal had been put away, the palace seemed a little more spacious. Chu Fengmian swept his gaze around and saw a palm-sized tile at the place where the heavenly crystal was just now. What's this? Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with joy and excitement when he saw the palm-sized tile. The Emperor Jar. It's a fragment of the Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian recognized the palm-sized tile at a glance. It was a fragment of the Emperor Jar. When Chu Fengmian came to the Flame Sky Lake, he had been attracted to the fragment of the Emperor Jar. Now that Chu Fengmian had the fragment of the Emperor Jar in his hand, the fragment must have sensed Chu Fengmian's presence and deliberately attracted him here. I didn't expect to encounter a fragment of the Emperor Jar here. With this one, I've already collected 5 fragments of the Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian was overjoyed. The Emperor Jar was divided into 9 pieces, and Chu Fengmian now had 4 fragments in his hand. If other warriors obtained the other 5 fragments, the Emperor Jar in Chu Fengmian's hand would be in great danger. It might even be taken away. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had never stopped looking for the fragments of the Emperor Jar. However, the 9 regions was so big that it was not easy to find the fragments of the Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian did not expect to encounter a fragment of the Emperor Jar in the House of Storms. With the addition of this piece, Chu Fengmian now had a total of 5 fragments of the Emperor Jar. In this way, even if the remaining 4 fragments of the Emperor Jar were obtained by the same person, they would not be a threat to Chu Fengmian. On the other hand, Chu Fengmian had already obtained 5 of the fragments, which was enough to take the initiative. When the time came, he could directly snatch the remaining fragments of the Emperor Jar. When the 9 fragments were combined, it would be enough to reform the Emperor Jar, a true ultimate immortal weapon. Thinking of this, Chu Fengmian did not hesitate. He took a step forward and grabbed the fragment of the Emperor Jar. Without any obstruction, Chu Fengmian grasped the fragment of the Emperor Jar in his hand. Feeling the familiar spiritual energy on it, Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a smile. That's right. This spiritual power was indeed a fragment of the Renhuang Jar. Just like when Chu Fengmian grabbed the Kanglan immortal armor, a memory suddenly appeared in Chu Fengmian's mind. This memory should be the memory left by Venerable Kanglan. It was a passage of Venerable Kanglan's words. This item is called the fragment of the human Emperor Jar. It's an extreme immortal weapon from the ancient era. In my entire life, I've only obtained 1 fragment of the human Emperor Jar. Even though it's just 1 fragment, it's still an extreme immortal weapon with boundless power. Senior Immortal Kanglan's words soon disappeared. It seemed that this Emperor Jar was also obtained by Senior Immortal Kanglan by chance back then. Even Master Immortal Kanglan, who was invincible in the 9 regions at that time, had only obtained 1 of the fragments of the Emperor Jar. He couldn't find the rest. It could be seen how difficult it was to find the fragments of the human Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian was now strong enough to obtain 5 of the fragments of the Emperor Jar. It seemed that Chu Fengmian and the Emperor Jar were fated to be together. Perhaps one day, the Emperor Jar could really be reborn from Chu Fengmian's hands. Come out, Emperor Jar. Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and the broken jar of the human emperor appeared in his palm. Since he had already obtained this fragment, Chu Fengmian naturally didn't delay any further. He directly refined it and merged it into one. The Emperor Jar was originally a broken spirit weapon. Therefore, it didn't need Chu Fengmian to activate any spiritual energy. The fragment of the Emperor Jar was integrated into the Emperor Jar. It repaired one of the damaged parts. Every time he obtained a fragment of the Emperor Jar, the power in it would increase exponentially. The Emperor Jar was condensed from only 4 fragments. In terms of power alone, it was enough to surpass any heaven-grade spiritual weapon in the 9 regions. It had reached a level beyond heaven-grade spiritual weapons. If he could obtain all 9 fragments of the Emperor Jar one day, Chu Fengmian would be able to see the true power of an extreme immortal weapon. As the fragments merged, the power contained in the Emperor Jar grew stronger and stronger. Luo Shi, who was standing aside, felt a little frightened by this power. Luo Shi could sense that this power wasn't hostile to her. However, she was a little flustered when she saw the human Emperor Jar. She saw with her own eyes that Chu Fengmian used the Emperor Jar to force back the 3 sovereigns who had joined forces and seriously injured them. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have imagined that a spiritual weapon could reach such a terrifying level. Is this an extreme immortal weapon? Luo Shi asked with uncertainty. Indeed, only the legendary extreme Dao celestial weapon could do this. However, this extreme immortal weapon was something that even the 7 great sects and the 6 demon sects had never possessed. Now that it had appeared in Chu Fengmian's hands, how could she believe it? Yes, this is called the Emperor Jar. It's an extreme immortal weapon. Yes, it's a broken extreme immortal weapon. There are a total of 9 fragments, and I only have 5. Chu Fengmian smiled when he heard Luo Shi's words. He didn't need to hide anything from Luo Shi. If Luo Shi still wanted to harm Chu Fengmian now, she wouldn't have chosen to save him back then. Of course, Chu Fengmian wouldn't hide anything from her. A broken extreme immortal weapon. In other words, it's only a fragment? Luo Shi's eyes were filled with shock when she heard Chu Fengmian's words. The power of the Emperor Jar terrified her to the extreme. She felt that if she were to take the attack of the Emperor Jar's power, she would die without a doubt. But such a terrifying power was actually still a fragment? Just how terrifying would a true extreme Dao immortal weapon be? Luo Shi couldn't even imagine it in her mind. Just as Luo Shi's imagination was running wild, the fragments of the Emperor Jar had completely condensed. At a glance, only the fragments on the surface seemed to be less, and the incomplete lines were also a little more complete. However, Chu Fengmian knew that every time a fragment of the Emperor Jar was integrated, the Emperor Jar would undergo a new transformation. The current power of the Emperor Jar was probably several times more terrifying than before. Chapter 921. Putting the Emperor Jar back into the empty ring, Chu Fengmian's face was full of smiles. Although it was extremely dangerous to come to the House of Storms this time, and he was almost forced into a desperate situation, it was really a blessing in disguise. He accidentally obtained the real treasure of the House of Storms. If it weren't for the 4 sovereigns who set a trap and led Chu Fengmian to the Blaze Sky Lake, Chu Fengmian would never have thought that the treasure of the House of Storms would be in the Blaze Sky Lake. Not only Chu Fengmian, but probably no one else would have thought that Senior Immortal Kanglin would actually leave the treasure at the bottom of the Blaze Sky Lake. Fortunately, there was a fragment of the Emperor Jar in Senior Immortal Kanglin's treasure, which allowed Chu Fengmian to detect the existence of the treasure. Saint-grade Spirit Stone, Kanglin Immortal Armor, Sky Crystal, Emperor Jar Fragment. I wonder what else is behind this. Chu Fengmian was looking forward to seeing what other treasures were hidden in the palace. The treasures left behind by Senior Immortal Kanglin were indeed not ordinary. Apart from the House of Storms, they couldn't be found anywhere else in the 9 regions. Let's go. Chu Fengmian looked at Luo Shi and said with a smile. Luo Shi was almost a little dazed along the way. She had never imagined that there would be so many treasures. Luo Shi had been following behind Chu Fengmian, wanting to see what other treasures there were in the House of Storms. The two walked for an unknown distance in the palace. This palace was like a bottomless pit, as if there was no end to it. Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi had already urged their escape light to hurry on, covering 100 miles in an instant. But even so, after walking for an hour, Chu Fengmian still hadn't reached the end. What's going on? Could it be that there are no more treasures in the House of Storms? But that's not right. If there are no treasures, there should be an end. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he quickened his pace again. No matter what, he had to reach the end of the House of Storms today. After another 10 minutes, Chu Fengmian was walking through the palace when he suddenly stopped. What's wrong? Luo Shi asked curiously when she saw Chu Fengmian suddenly stop. The spiritual energy here is so strange. A strange look appeared in Chu Fengmian's eyes. Suddenly, streams of spiritual energy were emitted from the palace. However, in Chu Fengmian's eyes, this spiritual energy seemed a little strange. Two different types of spiritual power, one ice and one fire, were unexpectedly transmitted from inside. What surprised Chu Fengmian was that these two spiritual energies, which were like fire and water, did not restrain each other at all. Instead, they complemented each other and formed an extremely unique power. This was something Chu Fengmian had never seen before. Looks like there's something else in the depths of this palace. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but quicken his pace. After another 10 minutes of walking, a large door finally appeared at the end of the palace. One side of the door was ice-cold blue, while the other side was fiery red. It looked extremely strange. The unique power of ice and fire was being emitted from behind the door. There are no restrictions on the door. Chu Fengmian carefully glanced at the door. When he saw that there were no restrictions on the door, Chu Fengmian slowly moved his hand and pushed the door open. In the House of Storms, Chu Fengmian had to be very careful. Against a figure like Venerable Kanglin, he had to be very careful. Even if he casually set up a restriction, it would be extremely fatal to Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had to be very careful. The door slowly opened and a gust of wind came head-on. This gust of wind swept up the spiritual energy of ice and fire. When it blew on Chu Fengmian's body, Chu Fengmian suddenly felt extremely hot. However, in the next moment, Chu Fengmian felt extremely cold. Even an ancestor would not be able to withstand the sudden change. No, the spiritual energy here is too strange. I can't bear it. Luo Shi's face was a little pale. She hadn't entered yet, but her spiritual energy was almost unable to bear it. Even if she activated her spiritual energy, she couldn't completely resist the heat and coldness. Then wait outside. I'll go in and take a look. Chu Fengmian glanced at Luo Shi and said. The stranger the spiritual energy emitted from the door, the more it was enough to arouse Chu Fengmian's curiosity. He also wanted to see what was hidden in the depths of this palace. You have to be careful. Luo Shi took a few steps back and retreated to a place where the gust of wind couldn't reach. She reminded him worriedly. Don't worry. Chu Fengmian smiled and stepped through the door. Behind the door was an incomparably huge open space. In the center of this open space there were two huge rocks that could be seen at a glance. Of these two huge rocks, one was completely red, and a kind of colorless flame was constantly burning on it. Chu Fengmian could tell at a glance that this flame was actually the most terrifying of the 9 heavenly flames, the pure yang heavenly flame. Such a rock was actually able to emit the pure yang heavenly flame? Chu Fengmian's shock hadn't subsided yet. He looked at the other rock, and the shock in his eyes didn't diminish at all. It was even more exaggerated than before. The other rock had an icy blue color, and a chilling aura was emitted from it. When this chill came into contact with the pure yang heavenly flame, it was actually enough to freeze the flame. The pure yang heavenly flame was almost the most terrifying flame in the 9 realms. Now, the chill emanating from the other rock was actually enough to freeze the pure yang heavenly flame. How terrifying was this cold? Between the two rocks, the pure yang heavenly flame and the chill constantly clashed and reached a kind of balance. The strange spiritual energy that could be felt from the outside was emanating from between the two of them. What exactly is this thing? There's actually such a strange thing in the 9 realms? Even with Chu Fengmian's knowledge, he was momentarily stunned. He couldn't figure out the origin of these two rocks. A rock that could emit the pure yang heavenly flame was not recorded in any of the ancient books in the 9 realms. Kid, where did you go this time? Why has the spiritual energy around you become so strange? Xing Xian's voice suddenly rang out in Chu Fengmian's mind. Then, Xing Xian's voice sounded as if he had seen a ghost, and he shouted in disbelief. Chapter 922. Heavenly Fire Divine Stone? Extreme Frost Divine Stone? Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with confusion when he heard the 2 names from Xing Xian's mouth. Chu Fengmian's knowledge was second only to those old antiques who had lived for a long time in the 9 regions. He had lived 2 lives and read many ancient books. It could be said that he knew a lot about most of the mysterious items in the 9 regions. However, Chu Fengmian had never heard of these 2 names before. There was only one possibility. These 2 divine stones weren't from the 9 regions, but from the outer regions. That was why Xing Xian knew. Heavenly Fire Divine Stone and Extreme Frost Divine Stone. Who would put these 2 damned things together? Who did this? A madman. Whoever did this must be a madman. Xing Xian shouted wildly in Chu Fengmian's mind. This was the first time Chu Fengmian had seen Xing Xian lose his composure. In Chu Fengmian's opinion, Xing Xian was an extremely mysterious guy. His background and knowledge were far from what Chu Fengmian could see through. He didn't expect Xing Xian to have such a side. Are these 2 divine stones very dangerous? Chu Fengmian asked tentatively. Judging from Xing Xian's loss of composure, these 2 divine stones were definitely not ordinary items. Very dangerous? Xing Xian snorted coldly when he heard Chu Fengmian's question. Only then did he calm down and speak. Any one of these 2 divine stones contains enough power to easily kill you tens of thousands of times. No, it can even completely destroy the House of Storms. Any one of these divine stones can directly destroy the House of Storms? Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with disbelief. Although the House of Storms wasn't comparable to the ruins of End Sky, it was still incomparably large. It would be very difficult for Chu Fengmian to explore it all by himself. Destroy the House of Storms? Even those Neverwither Realm ancestors wouldn't dare say such a thing. Now, any one of the 2 divine stones in front of him could actually destroy the House of Storms? If Chu Fengmian didn't believe Xing Xian, he would have thought Xing Xian was spouting nonsense. What, you don't believe me? If you don't believe me, you can try. But before that, you should send me to the 9 regions. I still need to wait for the next master. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Xing Xian curled his lips and said, I don't want to die in this damned place with you. Remember, stay away from these 2 damn things. Hearing Xing Xian's words, Chu Fengmian naturally understood. Even Xing Xian was so wary of them. These 2 divine stones were indeed extremely dangerous. Any one of them could destroy the House of Storms. However, this place was the treasure left behind by Venerable Kanglin. Why did Venerable Kanglin leave behind these 2 divine stones? However, only a madman would place these 2 divine stones together. Who would spend so much effort to leave these 2 divine stones here? Xing Xian's words revealed a bit of surprise. Not to mention the fact that it was extremely difficult to find these 2 god stones in the first place. It would take a lot of effort just to place these 2 god stones in the palace. Moreover, it would be even more difficult to balance the power of these 2 god stones. It was impossible for such a large amount of effort to be without a purpose. Chu Fengmian's thoughts were the same as Xing Xian's. Even Venerable Kanglin, who was invincible in the 9 regions, wouldn't be so bored as to put these 2 divine stones into the palace for no reason. Chu Fengmian scanned the surroundings of the 2 god stones. Suddenly, there seemed to be a flash of light in the air in front of him. Chu Fengmian abruptly grabbed it to take a look. This light was actually a jade talisman. This is? Chu Fengmian picked up the jade talisman and injected spiritual energy into it. Suddenly, an image appeared in Chu Fengmian's mind. This image was densely recorded with countless words. It was actually a technique. Chaotic 5 Emperors technique? Chu Fengmian could faintly see that this technique was called the Chaotic Five Emperors technique. Looking down, Chu Fengmian was a little stunned. The first sentence of this Chaotic Five Emperors technique was that those without God's veins could not cultivate it. Otherwise, they would die without a doubt. It was exactly the same as the first sentence of the Battle Dragon technique. Those without God's veins could not cultivate it? What kind of technique was this? After Chu Fengmian recovered from his shock, he hurriedly continued to read. However, he found that the mystery of this Chaotic Five Emperors technique was simply beyond his imagination. The mystery of this Chaotic Five Emperors technique was countless times more mysterious than any technique that Chu Fengmian had seen in the 9 regions. It was not inferior to the Battle Dragon technique in the slightest. In fact, it was slightly stronger. However, the Battle Dragon technique that Chu Fengmian had learned was only at the first level. If he could reach the second or third level, it would be on par with this Chaotic Five Emperors technique. Xing Xian, do you know about the Chaotic Five Emperors technique? Chu Fengmian hurriedly asked Xing Xian after he finished reading. This Chaotic Five Emperors technique could be said to be the same as the Battle Dragon technique. It was definitely not a technique that could be found in the 9 regions. In the entire history of the 9 domains, the divine pulse had always been a distant legend that cultivators without a divine pulse could not cultivate. If Chu Fengmian had not personally cultivated the divine pulse, he would not have believed that there were divine pulse cultivators in the 9 regions. Chaotic Five Emperors technique? Isn't this the technique that the 5 lunatics cultivated? Is this the Chaotic Five Emperors technique recorded in your jade talisman? Xing Xian was slightly surprised when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. However, he still explained. This Chaotic Five Emperors technique is an extremely crazy technique. Although it is incomparably mysterious, it is really too crazy. Even if 10,000 people cultivated it, there might not be anyone who could cultivate it successfully. No wonder there are 2 divine stones here. Turns out that someone left behind the Chaotic Five Emperors technique. These 2 divine stones are related to the Chaotic Five Emperors technique? Chu Fengmian asked in surprise. He had only taken a cursory look and did not pay attention. You will know after you take a look. As for this Chaotic Five Emperors technique, it is up to you whether you want to cultivate it or not. After Xing Xian finished speaking, he did not say anything else. As for Chu Fengmian, he once again injected a surge of spiritual energy into the jade talisman. This time, he carefully read through the Chaotic Five Emperors technique. Time passed second by second. Chu Fengmian stood motionless at the same spot for a full 6 hours. This Chaotic Five Emperors technique is really crazy. After reading the Chaotic Five Emperors technique, Chu Fengmian finally let out a sigh of relief. His only comment was that it was crazy. Chapter 923. When Chu Fengmian had finished reading the Battle Dragon art, his evaluation was heaven-defying. A person could possess the Battle Dragon bloodline and possess the power to rival an ancient Battle Dragon. The Battle Dragon art was mystical enough to be called heaven-defying. However, Chu Fengmian's evaluation of the Chaos Five Emperors art was crazy to the extreme. It was no wonder that Xing Xian had told him that it was up to Chu Fengmian to decide whether to cultivate the Chaos Five Emperors art. It was because the Chaos Five Emperors art was simply too dangerous. It was extremely dangerous even for divine vein cultivators. As for ordinary cultivators, they didn't even have the qualifications to cultivate it. The first step to cultivating the Chaos Five Emperors art was to devour the 5 elemental wonders. The 5 elemental wonders that one had to devour weren't simple 5 elemental wonders, but the most terrifying kind. They were the 2 divine stones in front of him. Extreme Cold Divine Stone. Heavenly Flame Divine Stone. When the 5 elemental spiritual energy was condensed to the extreme, the 5 elemental divine stone would be born. The power of any one of these divine stones was enough to destroy the entire returning ruins sky. As a matter of fact, It was enough to destroy a huge area in the central region. The first step to cultivating the Chaos 5 Emperor's art was to devour one of the 2 divine stones in front of him. Devouring such a terrifying power into one's body to refine it. The only word Chu Fengmian could think of to describe it was crazy. He didn't know how crazy a cultivator had to be to create such a frightening cultivation technique. However, although the Chaos 5 Emperor's art was crazy, the benefits one would obtain after cultivating it were also incomparably huge. The cultivation of the Chaos 5 Emperor's art could be said to be risking one's life. Once one could devour one of the divine stones. Using the power of the divine stones to refine one's body was enough to transform any ordinary body into one that wasn't inferior to an innate divine body. Innate divine body was also an innate divine body. It was because the innate divine body was lodged in some cultivators' bodies that it became an innate divine body. Warriors with innate divine bodies had an innate advantage, whether it was in cultivation or fighting against enemies. The Battle Dragon bloodline that Chu Fengmian obtained from cultivating the Battle Dragon art was no longer obvious as his cultivation base increased. Any ruler or even any life and death realm great ancestor had obtained many fortuitous encounters. The reason why Chu Fengmian was still able to fight above his level was mostly because of his power of creation, his countless spiritual weapons, and his unparalleled sword intent. However, Chu Fengmian's body was still very ordinary and not an innate divine body. If Chu Fengmian could possess the innate divine body, his strength would increase countless times. Although the primal Chaos 5 Emperor's art was crazy, it was still extremely attractive to Chu Fengmian. Indeed, his body needed to be modified. If he had the innate divine body, even if the 3 rulers joined forces to deal with him, he was confident that he could fight them alone. This life of mine, since I've already been reborn, since I've already died once, there's nothing to be afraid of. Chu Fengmian thought to himself. In his previous life, he could be said to have been a coward. In this life, he would not have any fear. So what if it was dangerous? The art of the 5 chaotic emperors was not impossible to cultivate. As long as there was a chance of survival, Chu Fengmian would give it a try. I've decided to cultivate it. Chu Fengmian nodded and said in a deep voice. You really want to cultivate the art of the 5 chaotic emperors' art? Xing Xian heard Chu Fengmian's words and asked again. You should be clear about the dangers of the art of the 5 chaotic emperors' art. However, I have to remind you that if you plan to cultivate it today, it will be much more dangerous than what is recorded. Xing Xian deliberately kept Chu Fengmian in suspense. Seeing that Chu Fengmian did not respond, he continued to speak. The art of the 5 chaotic emperors' art is indeed an extremely demonic cultivation technique. If you reach the Great Completion realm, you will be able to devour all 5 elements of spiritual energy and become a chaotic divine body. However, this is only an illusory legend. Normally, when cultivating the art of the 5 chaotic emperors' art, you will choose to devour one of the 5 elements of spiritual energy. However, today you can't devour either of these 2 divine stones. The power of these 2 divine stones of the 5 elements are now neutralizing each other, which is why you can come here. However, once you devour one of them, the other will definitely explode with all its power. At that time, you will definitely die. Xing Xian said slowly. Therefore, if you want to cultivate the art of the 5 chaotic emperors' art today, you must devour both divine stones at the same time. This is countless times more difficult than simply devouring one. You have to understand. After saying all this, Xing Xian did not speak again. Only Chu Fengmian could decide whether or not to cultivate the art of the 5 chaotic emperors' art. He could only tell Chu Fengmian the dangers. Devouring 2 divine stones at the same time. Devouring divine stones was an extremely dangerous action. It could be said that less than 1 in 10,000 people who truly cultivated the art of the 5 chaotic emperors would be able to survive. The possibility of devouring two divine stones at the same time was countless times lower. The power of the two divine stones was completely different. Once Chu Fengmian devoured them, if he was slightly careless, a fierce battle would definitely erupt in his body. At that time, Chu Fengmian would definitely die. Devouring two divine stones at the same time? After hearing Xing Xian's words, Chu Fengmian did not panic in the slightest. Instead, he revealed a cold smile. Then give it a try. The ice and fire divine body is countless times more powerful than a single divine body. Chu Fengmian's eyes suddenly opened. He had already completely memorized the art of the 5 chaotic emperor's art. He could devour the two divine stones at any time. Chu Fengmian slowly walked to the center of the two divine stones and slowly sat down. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian made his move. From the palms of his hands, a vortex suddenly appeared. The two vortexes directly devoured the two divine stones at the two sides. In an instant, the two divine stones that had been in the palace for an unknown period of time were suddenly uprooted. In the air, they turned into extremely pure spiritual energy, and all of it drilled into the vortex. The heavenly fire divine stone and the extreme frost divine stone were condensed from the purest 5 elements of spiritual energy. The first step Chu Fengmian took to activate the art of the 5 chaotic emperor's art was to scatter the two divine stones and turn them into the purest spiritual energy. Then, he devoured them all into his body. Boom! The moment the two divine stones entered Chu Fengmian's body, a trace of blood suddenly flowed out from the corner of Chu Fengmian's mouth. The moment the two balls of spiritual energy, one ice and one fire, were devoured by Chu Fengmian, they immediately began to collide violently. Chapter 924. The Divine Stone of Heavenly Fire and the Divine Stone of Extreme Frost. The spiritual energy of either of these two stones was enough to easily destroy the House of Storms. Chu Fengmian forcefully devoured such a terrifying amount of spiritual energy. Fire and water were incompatible. The spiritual energy of the two stones burst out in an instant in Chu Fengmian's body and began to fight against each other. Chu Fengmian's internal organs were frozen in one moment and burned by the heavenly fire in the next. This feeling was much more terrible than any pain Chu Fengmian had ever experienced. Kid, if you can't hold on, stop immediately. You haven't started refining yet. You still have a chance to stop. Xing Xian could see Chu Fengmian's pain and hurriedly shouted. The pain of devouring a single piece of God rock was enough to kill countless geniuses while cultivating the art of 5 primal chaos emperors. Now that Chu Fengmian was swallowing 2 stones at the same time, the pain was many times more terrible. Although Xing Xian knew that Chu Fengmian's willpower was absolutely tenacious, he was still worried that Chu Fengmian would really die from the pain. No! Chu Fengmian's ferocious face forced a smile. He, Chu Fengmian, had been reborn. He would never give up in this life. The chaotic 5 elements art was crazy? Chu Fengmian was even crazier than him. Refine for me. Chu Fengmian suddenly mobilized his spiritual energy and began to refine the power of the 2 stones. Once he chose to start refining, there was no turning back. There were only 2 paths. Succeed or die. There was no other way. What a crazy kid. How can a kid in his early 20s have such terrifying willpower? Xing Xian saw that Chu Fengmian had already made up his mind and could only shake his head helplessly. Since Chu Fengmian had chosen to refine, there was no turning back. Even Xing Xian felt strange about Chu Fengmian's willpower. Since Xing Xian was born, he had seen countless geniuses and monsters, but Chu Fengmian was the most special one. I hope you won't let me down. Let me leave the 9 regions and go back. Xing Xian whispered to himself. He raised his head and seemed to be looking at the outer realm. From his eyes, one could see some nostalgia and killing intent. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Chu Fengmian's body was alternating between hot and cold every second. Regardless of whether it was the flame or the chill, They were both the most terrifying existences in the entire 9 zones. Chu Fengmian's 5 viscera and 6 bowels were almost destroyed every time they were flipped upside down. However, Chu Fengmian relied on his terrifying vitality to hold on every time. 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 1,000,000 times. No matter how many times Chu Fengmian's body was destroyed, his body could always recover. 6 hours had passed. Almost an instant of pain was enough to make a ruler die from the pain. As for Chu Fengmian, he had already endured for a full 6 hours. His pain did not lessen with time. Instead, it became more and more intense. As Chu Fengmian refined more and more ice and fire spiritual energy, the confrontation between the two spiritual energies became more and more serious. However, Chu Fengmian was still sitting in the same place, motionless. His face was already extremely ferocious. However, Chu Fengmian's eyes were still incomparably resolute. This resoluteness was unshakable. Divine power of ice and fire subdue. After an unknown period of time, Chu Fengmian suddenly stood up. The moment he stood up abruptly, his aura was extremely terrifying. In the face of such pain, Chu Fengmian's aura did not weaken. Instead, it became more and more terrifying as the training went on. 2 spiritual veins gradually condensed on Chu Fengmian's back. These 2 spiritual veins, one ice and one fire, began to condense as Chu Fengmian continued to devour the spiritual energy of the 2 divine stones. He actually withstood it? Xing Xian looked at the 2 spiritual veins that were gradually condensing on Chu Fengmian's back. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Throughout history, countless geniuses and monsters had died because of this chaotic 5 Emperor's art. The geniuses who were able to cultivate the chaotic 5 Emperor's art were all geniuses who possessed the divine veins. It could be said that their aptitude was not inferior to Chu Fengmian's. Some of them were even more terrifying than Chu Fengmian's. However, countless of them had died under this pain, not to mention that Chu Fengmian was devouring 2 divine stones at the same time. Xing Xian probably never thought that Chu Fengmian would actually be able to make it through. The moment the 2 spiritual veins condensed, it meant that the cultivation was completed. The condensing of spiritual veins was the final step of the chaotic 5 Emperor's art. However, it was also the most dangerous step. The slightest carelessness could lead to a complete loss. What exactly did he go through to have such a tenacious will? Xing Xian looked at Chu Fengmian and muttered to himself. He did not choose Chu Fengmian willingly. It was just that the person at the bottom of the lake was who. He had no other choice but to accept Chu Fengmian as his master. Therefore, Xing Xian did not expect Chu Fengmian to reach this step. He also could not imagine why Chu Fengmian desired power so much. In his previous life, Chu Fengmian had seen his master being killed with his own eyes. His senior brothers and sisters were killed by the 7 great sections. Chu Fengmian's desire for power had reached its peak. As long as he could obtain power, Chu Fengmian would not choose to give up no matter how difficult it was. The power of the 2 divine stones has finally been completely devoured. Chu Fengmian could clearly feel that the power of the 2 divine stones had been completely devoured by Chu Fengmian. All the power was integrated into Chu Fengmian's body to condense the 2 spiritual veins. However, Chu Fengmian could not relax at this time. He was even more vigilant than before. The pain that Chu Fengmian was suffering now was countless times more than when he was devouring. Even Chu Fengmian's soul felt like it was being torn apart by this power. The pain was extreme. Even death, for Chu Fengmian, was a kind of desire, a kind of release. No, I can't die. I haven't taken my revenge. I haven't killed the 7 great sects. I can't die. Revenge. These 2 words made Chu Fengmian's eyes turn red. He desired power. His everything was for these 2 words. Therefore, he could not give up. Condense. Ice and fire divine power. Subdue them all. I want to stand at the top of the 9 regions. Anyone, any existence, must submit. Chapter 925. Chu Fengmian shouted angrily. Boom! Beside Chu Fengmian, the ice and fire spiritual energies were gradually surrendering to Chu Fengmian. An indomitable aura rose from Chu Fengmian's back and soared into the sky. He, Chu Fengmian, wanted to be the emperor of the 9 regions. Now, he couldn't even subdue the 2 god stones. How could he subdue them and dominate the 9 regions? Boom! Boom! The 2 spiritual meridians formed behind Chu Fengmian's back in a breath's time. Spiritual energy gushed out from the 2 spiritual veins. It was as if a long river had finally been opened. The endless spiritual energy filled Chu Fengmian's body like a flood. Chu Fengmian's power continued to surge in this spiritual energy, and it continued to increase without end. Chu Fengmian's realm didn't change, but in terms of power, it was several times stronger than before. This was the power of the innate godly body. Warriors who possessed the innate divine body could be said to be invincible when fighting against those of the same level. This was because their spiritual energy alone was many times stronger than martial artists of the same realm. Moreover, it was supported by the innate power. Now, Chu Fengmian could finally taste the power of the innate godly body. He had swallowed the heavenly fire divine stone and the extreme cold divine stone to cultivate the ice and fire divine body. It was many times stronger than the godly body that had swallowed a single god stone. The godly body that had swallowed a single god stone was similar to Han Yueli's profound cold body. Among the countless innate godly bodies, it could only be ranked in the middle. Although he was also extremely talented, there was still a gap between him and the innate divine bodies that were ranked in the top 10. However, Chu Fengmian's ice and fire divine body had 2 spiritual meridians, one ice and one fire, that complemented each other in Chu Fengmian's body. The ice and fire divine body was probably not inferior to the top 10 divine bodies among the innate divine bodies. Chu Fengmian slowly raised his hand. From his palm, 2 forces, one ice and one fire, hovered at the same time. Is this the power of the ice and fire divine body? Chu Fengmian suddenly hit the air with his palm. Boom! Rumble! In front of Chu Fengmian, almost unparalleled power erupted. The power of this palm alone was even close to the power that Chu Fengmian had unleashed when he used the Mortal Emperor Jar. What a terrifying power! What the hell is going on? How could there be such a huge change? Luo Shi watched from afar as Chu Fengmian made his move. She kept retreating, afraid that she would be affected by this power. If anyone was affected by this power, even if they were a ruler, they would most likely be doomed. In less than a day, Chu Fengmian's strength had grown to such a terrifying level. His realm hasn't changed at all, but his strength has increased countless times. This is beyond the heavens' mandate realm. Even emperors aren't a match for him anymore. Luo Shi looked at Chu Fengmian in shock. However, Luo Shi would never have thought that Chu Fengmian would have to pay such a huge price to possess such power. The slightest misstep would result in eternal damnation. In the entire 9 regions, Chu Fengmian was probably the only one who could endure such great pain to cultivate the art of the 5 Chaos Emperors. Chu Fengmian looked at the scene in front of him and was very satisfied. The power of the ice and fire divine body that he had just activated was probably several times stronger than before. The divine body condensed by the art of the 5 Chaos Emperors was not inferior to the current divine body. The true chaotic divine body was even more powerful than any innate divine body. It could be said that although Chu Fengmian's realm did not change after coming to the House of Storms, his strength was many times stronger than before. The ice and fire divine body that Chu Fengmian had condensed had also found a fragment of the Mortal Emperor Jar. The ice and fire divine body's help to Chu Fengmian was not that simple. In the future, as Chu Fengmian's strength became stronger, the ice and fire divine body would be more helpful to him. The ice and fire divine body was exactly the same as the innate divine body. The stronger the warrior, the more he could exert the innate divine power. It seems that the treasures of the House of Storms should be here. The square where Chu Fengmian was at was already at the end of the palace. It seemed that the art of the 5 Chaos Emperors and the 2 Divine Stones should be the last treasures left by Venerable Kanglan. I wonder what kind of person Venerable Kanglan is to step out of the 9 regions. If one day I step out of the 9 regions, I might have a chance to meet him. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh. Chu Fengmian had obtained a lot of ancient caverns and seen a lot of treasures, but the treasures left behind by immortal Venerable Kanglan were absolutely the most shocking to him. Let's go. After sighing, Chu Fengmian looked at Luo Shi and said. The 2 figures gradually left the depths of the palace and walked towards the outside. It had only been 3 days since the opening of the House of Storms. The 3 sovereigns should still be in the House of Storms and had not left. It's time to settle the score. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered, and some killing intent emerged in his eyes. The 3 sovereigns had forced Chu Fengmian into such a desperate situation. Chu Fengmian had sworn that he would kill the 3 of them. Now it was indeed the time to fulfill his promise. Chu Fengmian and Luo Shi's figures returned to the entrance of the palace. After leaving the palace, they were about to return to the Flame Heavenly Lake. But this time, facing the heavenly fire of the Flame Heavenly Lake, Chu Fengmian's heart was not as frightened as before. Hold me tight. Chu Fengmian carried Luo Shi with one hand and suddenly rushed out. As soon as they left the palace and fell into the Flame Heavenly Lake, countless colorless pure yang heavenly fire swept towards Chu Fengmian. These pure yang heavenly fire were enough to devour all living things. Humph! Chu Fengmian glanced at the pure yang heavenly fire and activated the ice and fire spiritual vein. Suddenly, layers of blue mysterious ice condensed around Chu Fengmian. Even the surrounding pure yang heavenly fire could not burn through the blue mysterious ice. Chu Fengmian stood in it and walked through the Flame Heavenly Lake, safe and sound. Whoosh! Chu Fengmian carried Luo Shi and his figure gradually turned into a ray of light, flying directly above the Flame Heavenly Lake. Chapter 926. It's been 3 days. Why haven't the 2 of them come up yet? Above the Blaze Heaven Lake, Emperor Bao frowned and said as he looked at the countless flames that filled the lake. The sky above the Blaze Heaven Lake was still filled with countless spiritual energy that formed an inescapable net. These densely packed restrictions completely sealed off the sky above the Blaze Heaven Lake. No one could leave the Blaze Heaven Lake. Emperor Bao, Emperor Ning, and Emperor Li, the 3 sovereigns were standing above the Blaze Heaven Lake, overlooking everything below. In the past 3 days, they had not left the Blaze Heaven Lake. Instead, they were waiting for Chu Fengmian's attack. However, 3 days had passed and they still could not find Chu Fengmian's figure. Maybe this kid has already died in the Flame Sky Lake and was burned to ashes by the heavenly fire. Even a Wushang old ancestor wouldn't be able to hold on for 3 days. How could this kid do it? Emperor Ning said impatiently. Let's leave. It's not easy to come to the House of Storms. Instead of wasting time here, we might as well look for the treasures. That's right. It's a pity not to look for the treasures of the House of Storms. This kid is definitely dead after falling into the Blaze Heaven Lake. Let's not bother about him anymore. Emperor Li also said from the side. Let's wait. This kid is hiding too many strange things. Maybe he's not dead yet. Emperor Bao's eyes flickered as he shook his head. Chu Fengmian had escaped from the encirclement of the experts of the 7 major sects countless times. He would not believe that Chu Fengmian would die until the very last moment. Emperor Ning and Emperor Li shook their heads when they heard Emperor Bao's words. However, they did not say anything else. In their opinion, Emperor Bao was being too cautious. In 3 days, even an immortal realm's supreme old ancestor would be burned to death by the heavenly fire if he fell into the Blaze Heaven Lake. Not to mention an immortal realm brat. At this moment, in the Blaze Heaven Lake, a ray of light was extremely fast. It shuttled through the countless flames and rushed up from the bottom of the Blaze Heaven Lake. Boom! At this moment, a rumbling sound resounded within the Flame Sky Lake. What's going on? Someone is rushing up from the blaze heaven lake. Is it Chu Fengmian? He's not dead yet? The three sovereigns' faces changed as they quickly turned their heads to look. They immediately saw Chu Fengmian, shuttling through the countless heavenly fire of the blaze heaven lake. 3 days? This kid is still not dead? Emperor Ning and Emperor Li looked at Chu Fengmian, had a look of disbelief. 3 days. Even if they were to be in the Yantian Lake, they would undoubtedly die. However, Chu Fengmian was actually still alive. However, their shocked looks, of course. Chu SSS died SSS Fengning TS. He stayed in the flame heaven lake for 3 days. No matter what method he used, he must be incomparably weak right now. Let's take advantage of this opportunity to kill this kid first. As Sovereign Ning spoke, he had already made his move. Emperor Ning's figure suddenly disappeared in the air. He turned into a ray of light and rushed over to where Chu Fengmian was. In an instant, he was in front of Chu Fengmian. His face was extremely ferocious as he slammed his palm at Chu Fengmian's chest. Die, kid! The palm contained endless killing intent as it enveloped Chu Fengmian. In 3 days, Emperor Ning had fully recovered from his injuries. Now, he was in a state of full strength. The sharp spiritual energy in the palm struck Chu Fengmian. I didn't expect you to still be waiting for me. Well, I don't have to look for you one by one. Chu Fengmian saw that the 3 sovereigns had not left yet. It seemed that they still wanted to wait for Chu Fengmian. That's good. It would save Chu Fengmian the trouble of looking for them one by one. In the face of Sovereign Ning's terrifying palm strike, Chu Fengmian sneered. He didn't try to dodge, but instead rushed forward. He slammed his palm at Emperor Ning with his bare hands. Courting death. Seeing Chu Fengmian resist with his bare hands, Emperor Ning's eyes were filled with mockery. Previously, Chu Fengmian was able to contend with them because of his sword intent and the ancestral dragon supreme sword. If he could not kill Chu Fengmian with his bare hands, then he did not deserve to be called an sovereign. Hearing Emperor Ning's mockery, Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a cold smile. Just as the 2 palms were about to collide in the air, Chu Fengmian suddenly said softly, "Heavenly fire!" The power of the fire spiritual vein was released from Chu Fengmian's body and integrated into Chu Fengmian's palm. Layers of pure yang heavenly fire spread out from Chu Fengmian's palm. Die! Boom! Countless pure yang heavenly fire blasted out with Chu Fengmian's palm. The pure yang heavenly fire was enough to burn everything. The spiritual energy of Emperor Ning's palm was burned into nothing by the pure yang heavenly fire. But it was not over yet. Countless pure yang heavenly fire engulfed Emperor Ning's body and plunged him into a sea of fire. Ah! What kind of fire is this? Pure yang heavenly fire. How is this possible? How can you control the pure yang heavenly fire? In the sea of fire, Emperor Ning screamed in agony. At first, Emperor Ning did not take the fire seriously. Ordinary fire could not threaten sovereigns like him. But in the next moment, Emperor Ning's expression changed completely. Once touched by the pure yang heavenly fire, it would not stop until one was dead. His spiritual energy could not resist the burning of the pure yang heavenly fire. Die! Chu Fengmian looked at Emperor Ning and slapped him again. Emperor Ning's body was smashed into pieces by this palm. Only a mist of blood was left in the air. Sovereign Ning, a sovereign of the heavenly mandate realm, was killed in a single move by Chu Fengmian. Not bad. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a satisfied smile. The pure yang heavenly fire was not something that could be controlled by humans. Only a few people with innate divine bodies were qualified to control it. Chu Fengmian condensed the pure yang heavenly fire all of a sudden. Even an sovereign would be killed by it. This was the terrifying part of the divine body of ice and fire. Devour! Chu Fengmian looked at the mist of blood and waved his hand. Suddenly, a vortex was formed. It devoured the blood mist that filled the sky and sent it to the sacred tree, nourishing the sacred tree and causing it to grow continuously. Chapter 9:27. The divine tree was still very weak. Every time it devoured the blood essence of an emperor, it would grow a little. Chu Fengmian could feel that his body was becoming tougher as the divine tree grew. Emperor Bao and Emperor Li only recovered from their daze when they saw Chu Fengmian's aura rising steadily. Emperor Ning died just like that? Emperor Ning was an emperor. Who would have thought that he couldn't even withstand a single blow from Chu Fengmian? Chu Fengmian didn't even use a spiritual weapon. He could kill Emperor Ning with his bare hands. Not good. This kid must have had a fortuitous encounter. We can't let him leave the flame heavenly lake. Emperor Bao was the first to react and shouted. Now that Chu Fengmian was still in the flame heavenly lake, they could still think of a way to deal with him. If Chu Fengmian rushed out, it would be really troublesome. Seal. On the flame heavenly lake, the spiritual energy that had been set up long ago was suddenly activated. Streams of spiritual energies intertwined with each other, forming a huge array that blocked the flame heavenly lake. At the same time, Emperor Bao and Emperor Li attacked at the same time. The spiritual energy on their bodies instantly burst out. The Million Treasure River bombarded the air, and endless spiritual energy bombarded Chu Fengmian's body. Within a breath's time, Emperor Bao and Emperor Li had unleashed countless martial skills at Chu Fengmian at the same time. Countless martial skills drowned Chu Fengmian. If it was before, Chu Fengmian would have to desperately defend against the joint attack of Emperor Bao and Emperor Li. He might even have to use all his trump cards. But this time, Chu Fengmian didn't do anything. He didn't even care about the bombardment of the martial skills. He directly carried Luo Shi and rushed towards the flame heavenly lake. What's going on? Is this kid crazy? Seeing Chu Fengmian's action, Emperor Bao and Emperor Li's eyes were filled with shock. Under the bombardment of such martial skills, Chu Fengmian didn't care and didn't even try to defend? But in the next moment, when the martial skills bombarded Chu Fengmian's body, a thin layer of ice suddenly condensed around Chu Fengmian's body. This thin ice looked like it would shatter with a touch, but when the countless martial techniques bombarded it, it actually did not budge in the slightest. All the martial techniques were blocked by the thin layer of ice around Chu Fengmian. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's body directly rushed into the array above the flame sky lake. Countless spiritual energies kept entangling Chu Fengmian, preventing him from taking another step. Tear. Chu Fengmian snorted coldly. He suddenly waved his hand, which turned into a huge war dragon claw in the air. The formation set up by the four sovereigns was torn apart by the war dragon's claw. The formation set up by the four rulers could not stop Chu Fengmian at this moment and was forcefully torn apart. I'm finally out. After leaving the flame sky lake, Chu Fengmian finally revealed a slight smile. When he looked at Emperor Li and Emperor Bao again, the killing intent in his eyes was no longer concealed. In the flame sky lake, Chu Fengmian still had to divide a large portion of his spiritual energy to resist the surrounding heavenly fire. But now Chu Fengmian finally rushed out. Now it was time to settle the score. Not good. He rushed out. Chu Fengmian's speed was too fast. The formation set up above the flame sky lake did not delay Chu Fengmian at all. It was instantly torn apart in front of Chu Fengmian. By the time Emperor Bao and Emperor Li reacted, Chu Fengmian had already rushed out of the flame sky lake with Luo Shi in his arms. In just 3 days, how did this kid become so strong? Emperor Bao looked at Chu Fengmian with deep fear in his eyes. If Chu Fengmian was able to contend with them before, it was because of Chu Fengmian's fortuitous encounter and his countless spiritual weapons. In terms of true strength, Emperor Bao was definitely able to crush Chu Fengmian. But now, Chu Fengmian could rush out of the flame sky lake with his bare hands and kill Emperor Ning with one blow. Even if Emperor Ning was careless, it was enough to prove Chu Fengmian's strength. No, it's not easy to kill this kid now. Let's capture Charm Demon Supreme Lord first. The two of them must have teamed up to capture Charm Demon's Supreme Lord and deal with this kid. Emperor Bao thought quickly in his heart. Now that Chu Fengmian rushed out with Luo Shi, it naturally meant that the two of them were already on the same side. According to the rumors, Chu Fengmian's character was very clear about gratitude and grudges. He was very loyal. Now that he had captured Luo Shi, it would be enough to deal with Chu Fengmian. Thinking of this, Emperor Bao did not hesitate and suddenly attacked. The Million Treasure River immediately emerged from his hand. The Million Treasure River was no longer as broken as before. It had already recovered half of its strength. The power of the Million Treasure River descended from the sky. The spiritual energy of the 10,000 spiritual weapons was released at the same time, and all of them bombarded towards Chu Fengmian. However, Emperor Bao suddenly turned around and directly grabbed Luo Shi, who was beside Chu Fengmian. He directly grabbed Luo Shi's neck and wanted to capture her. "How dare you touch my woman? You're courting death." Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold. His killing intent soared to the sky. Emperor Bao actually wanted to capture Luo Shi to threaten Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian valued friendship the most in his life. Emperor Bao clearly knew this, which was why he made such a decision. This undoubtedly touched Chu Fengmian's reverse scale. "What Million Treasure River? Break it all!" Chu Fengmian roared angrily. The power of the ice and fire divine body was pushed to the extreme. Suddenly, the two different spiritual energies appeared on Chu Fengmian's fists at the same time. In the flame sky lake, Chu Fengmian used most of his strength to resist the heavenly fire. It was enough to kill Emperor Ning directly. Now that Chu Fengmian used all his strength, the aura on his body was simply terrifying to an indescribable extent. Even the emperors could not be compared to Chu Fengmian. His fist blasted towards the Million Treasure River. The power of ice and fire instantly swept across the entire Million Treasure River. Countless spiritual weapons in the Million Treasure River were directly shattered by the power of ice and fire. The Million Treasure River was directly shattered by Chu Fengmian's fist. The entire Million Treasure River began to shatter inch by inch. In an instant, it disappeared from the sky and turned into the tiniest powder, floating in the air. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's other fist blasted towards Emperor Bao. Chapter 928. Before the punch landed, the terrifying divine power of ice and fire caused Emperor Bao's expression to change drastically. The terrifying power was enough to tear his body apart. Even Emperor Bao, who had reached the peak of the heavenly fate realm, was shocked by the spiritual power. How could this man possess such terrifying power all of a sudden? Ice and fire, these are two completely different spiritual powers. It's impossible for them to appear at the same time. This boy's body actually accommodated these two spiritual powers. Shouldn't they explode when they clash? How could he still control them? Emperor Bao shouted in disbelief. These two diametrically opposed forces were actually integrated by Chu Fengmian's body. This was simply beyond his knowledge and understanding. However, there was no time for him to understand. After the divine power of ice and fire, Chu Fengmian's punch had already landed. Glazed golden body! Emperor Bao suddenly shouted, and a glass-like luster emerged from his body. His skin became crystal clear, and his entire body suddenly turned into a glass-like appearance. Emperor Bao's body no longer looked like a physical body but an existence similar to a spiritual weapon. Emperor Bao's nickname was not because he had the 10,000 treasures river, but because his body had been cultivated into an existence similar to a spirit weapon. A human's physical body naturally could not be compared to a spiritual weapon. Boy, no matter how many fortuitous encounters you have, you must die today. Emperor Bao looked at Chu Fengmian's incoming punch and shouted. He also threw a punch over. His glazed golden body was tougher than a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. He did not believe that he would lose to Chu Fengmian in terms of physical body. Chu Fengmian was now fighting with his physical body, which gave him the best opportunity. From Bao Huang's fist wind, waves of colored glaze radiated out, turning his fist into an existence like colored glaze. It was incomparably hard as it rushed towards Chu Fengmian and threw a punch. "You're digging your own grave." Chu Fengmian looked at Emperor Bao's action and his eyes flashed with ridicule. Compared to a spiritual weapon was naturally tougher. Unfortunately, this was only the body of an ordinary martial artist. Now that Chu Fengmian's physical body had been refined by the divine tree, it was definitely tougher than a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. Since Emperor Bao dared to fight Chu Fengmian head-on, he was indeed courting death. Chu Fengmian was not angry. Instead, he laughed. He did not hold back his punch at all and collided with Emperor Bao's fist wind. Boom! When the two fists collided, there was a huge explosion in the air. The collision of their fists was no less powerful than the collision of two heaven-grade spirit artifacts. When Emperor Bao saw that Chu Fengmian didn't dodge and went straight for him, he couldn't help but smile. However, at the moment of collision, Emperor Bao's smile froze. His body felt as if it was being turned upside down by the collision. His internal organs were being swept up by an enormous force and were on the verge of shattering. Before Emperor Bao could stabilize himself, a cracking sound was heard all of a sudden. Emperor Bao's fist wind and his glazed right hand started to shatter gradually. In terms of physical body, even Emperor Bao's glazed golden body was not worth mentioning in front of Chu Fengmian. Bam! Emperor Bao's body was sent flying. His right hand was shattered and disappeared in the air. Countless cracks appeared on his body. His physical body, which was comparable to a sky-grade spirit weapon, was easily beaten into countless cracks by Chu Fengmian. Absolute kill of the heavens and earth. Just as the two forces collided and Emperor Bao's body was sent flying, Emperor Bao's voice suddenly rang out. Emperor Li's voice suddenly sounded. His body was extremely fast, and in his hand there was a short dagger that was about a foot long. His spiritual energy was integrated into the foot-long dagger. Suddenly, he attacked Chu Fengmian from behind and slashed at Chu Fengmian's body. Sneak attack. Absolute kill. Emperor Li had not made a move just now because he was waiting for the best opportunity. When Chu Fengmian and Emperor Bao collided, all of Chu Fengmian's attention was focused on Emperor Bao. Then, he suddenly made a move. This foot-long dagger condensed Emperor Li's spiritual energy and pierced directly at Chu Fengmian's body. Once it pierced into Chu Fengmian's body, the spiritual energy contained in this foot-long dagger was enough to completely tear Chu Fengmian's body apart. However, this foot-long dagger suddenly stopped when it was less than 3 inches away from Chu Fengmian's body. A thin layer of ice suddenly appeared around Chu Fengmian's body. No matter how sharp this dagger was, it could not pierce through this thin layer of ice and could not advance any further. "You think you can kill me with a sneak attack?" Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold. He had already expected Emperor Li to launch a sneak attack. Although Emperor Li's strength was not strong, this person was extremely scheming. He would definitely launch a sneak attack when Chu Fengmian was most relaxed. All of this was within Chu Fengmian's expectations. Not good, retreat quickly. After the assassination failed, Emperor Li's eyes revealed a sense of crisis. All of his spiritual energy was condensed on this foot-long dagger. After the assassination failed, he had no strength to contend with Chu Fengmian. Emperor Li's body hurriedly retreated, gradually distancing himself from Chu Fengmian. "You still want to escape? Stay here." Chu Fengmian did not even raise his head. With a wave of his hand, an incomparably huge war dragon claw condensed in the air. This war dragon claw was incomparably majestic. The moment it descended from the sky and enveloped Emperor Li's body, the rolling dragons might firmly suppressed Emperor Li's body. Just this dragon's might alone made Emperor Li somewhat breathless. His face was full of horror. No! Before this roar could finish, the war dragon claw had mercilessly descended. All of Emperor Li's strength could not resist this war dragon claw. His body was directly shattered in an instant. His flesh and blood were directly obliterated, leaving only a cloud of essence blood that was devoured by the divine tree. It was another move. Not only Emperor Ning, but now even Emperor Li was killed in one move in front of Chu Fengmian. Of the 3 emperors, 2 were dead and 1 was injured. Although Luo Shi, who was standing beside Chu Fengmian, knew that Chu Fengmian's current strength was certainly not the same as before, she was still frightened. Chu Fengmian was facing 3 emperors, super powerhouses who dominated the 9 regions. Since when were 3 emperors no different from ants in Chu Fengmian's eyes? They were easily killed by Chu Fengmian as if slaughtering chickens and dogs. Chapter 929. Shocking. Luo Shi, who had witnessed everything with her own eyes, was deeply shocked. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, who would have thought that a great ancestor of the divine martial realm could easily kill an emperor? Emperor Bao, who was the only one left, was dumbfounded. Emperor Li's assassination technique was terrifying to the extreme. 4 or 5 sovereigns had died in his hands. Those emperors did not even have time to react before they were assassinated by Emperor Li. Even though he had a deep understanding of Emperor Li, he had to be extremely careful. However, when Chu Fengmian fought with him, he could easily resolve Emperor Li's assassination. He could even kill Emperor Li directly, not giving him any chance to escape. Oh no, this person's strength can no longer be suppressed. I can only ask the great ancestor to come and kill him. Emperor Bao looked at Chu Fengmian with fear in his eyes. Chu Fengmian had only advanced by 2 levels and reached the divine martial realm, but he already had such terrifying strength. If Chu Fengmian were to enter Heaven's Mandate one day and become a king, wouldn't his strength become even more terrifying? This person must be eliminated. Emperor Bao had made up his mind. He must escape and return to the sect to ask the great ancestor to kill Chu Fengmian. Golden body reconstruction. Suddenly, countless pills flew out in front of Emperor Bao. There were dozens of pills, all of which were heaven-level spiritual pills. He swallowed all of them in one breath. A huge amount of spiritual energy immediately helped Emperor Bao to reform his shattered lustrous golden body. Let's go. After Emperor Bao reformed his golden body, he did not have any intention to fight against Chu Fengmian. Instead, he turned into a ray of light and escaped. After the 7th day of the House of Storms opening, all the martial artists would be teleported out. 3 days had already passed. After 4 days they would be teleported out. Emperor Bao's lustrous golden body could be said to be the most difficult to kill among the emperors of the Destiny realm. Fleeing from the House of Storms, Emperor Bao was confident that he could wait until the House of Storms was over. As long as he returned to the 9 regions, he would be able to summon the great ancestor of the sect to kill Chu Fengmian. You want to stall for time? When the House of Storms closes, you'll summon your sect's grand ancestor to kill me. Seeing Emperor Bao's actions, Chu Fengmian understood what Emperor Bao was thinking. Drag. Behind Emperor Bao were the incomparably large 7 sections. As long as they could delay until they returned to the 9 regions, the supreme ancestors of the 7 sects would definitely be able to kill Chu Fengmian. Emperor Bao's wishful thinking was not bad. Unfortunately, Chu Fengmian would not give him this opportunity. Stop trying to stall for time. Do you really think I can't kill you? If I want to kill you, it will be as easy as slaughtering a chicken or a dog. Looking at Emperor Bao's escaping light, Chu Fengmian sneered. As soon as his voice faded, Chu Fengmian's figure also moved. In just 3 breaths, Chu Fengmian's escaping light suddenly caught up. His escaping light was much faster than Emperor Bao's. Before Emperor Bao could heave a sigh of relief, he realized that Chu Fengmian had already arrived beside him. Damn it! Being forced into a desperate situation, Emperor Bao's face revealed a bit of madness. Since when had he, an Emperor Realm cultivator, been chased by a divine martial ancestor? Boom! The aura on Emperor Bao's body suddenly expanded in an instant. Rolling golden flames burned on his body. The golden flame was burning Emperor Bao's life essence blood. Emperor Bao did not hesitate to burn his blood essence. Now, he was going to make a last desperate attempt. This was already a sure kill move. He was going all out. Even if Emperor Bao defeated Chu Fengmian now, he would definitely die. It could be said that he was going all out. 1,000 treasure sacrifice. Heavenly mandate strike. Emperor Bao seemed to have turned himself into a spiritual weapon. He directly sacrificed himself to the heavens in exchange for unparalleled power. All of his spiritual energy was gathered on his right fist. He threw out a punch. The space of the House of Storms shattered under the terrifying power and started to disperse. This was Emperor Bao's ultimate punch. Under this punch, all living things would be annihilated. Not good. Retreat. Emperor Bao is going all out. Even if we don't kill him now, he'll definitely die in a few days. Luo Shi, who was at the side, felt the terrifying spiritual energy of Emperor Bao and hurriedly said, Emperor Bao, who was burning his blood essence, surpassed the heavenly mandate realm in a short period of time and reached the Paragon realm. The power that he possessed was already on a completely different level compared to before. Even if Chu Fengmian's strength had skyrocketed, it was still unknown who would win against Emperor Bao, who was at the Paragon realm. It's okay. Don't waste these few days. Even if he's struggling, he won't be a match for me. Hearing Luo Shi's reminder, Chu Fengmian sneered. Delay for a few days and wait for the lamp to run out of oil? There was no need for that. Now, Chu Fengmian would directly kill Emperor Bao and shatter all of his hope. Sword, come. Deng. The ancestral dragon's supreme sword instantly appeared in Chu Fengmian's hand. The moment Chu Fengmian held it in his hand, the ancestral dragon's supreme sword could feel Chu Fengmian's power. It was no longer the same as before. Suddenly, a dragon's roar resounded, celebrating for Chu Fengmian. Let's use this person's blood as an offering to the sword. Breaking the firmament with a sword. Chu Fengmian held the ancestral dragon's supreme sword in his hand and a soaring sword will erupted from his body. This sharp sword would tear apart some old ancestors who approached it. The power of the sword was condensed to its peak and then fell from the sky, clashing with Emperor Bao's heavenly mandate strike. Kacha! Kacha! When the two forces collided, there wasn't a rumble as expected. Instead, there was a crisp sound. Emperor Bao's heavenly mandate strike that he unleashed after risking his life couldn't even withstand a single blow from Chu Fengmian's sword. All of the spiritual energy was swept up by the sword and was mercilessly devoured by the sword. Emperor Bao's body was sent flying in front of the sword edge. In front of the sword, he was suddenly split into two. Then, all of them began to shatter and disappear in the sky. In a frenzy, Emperor Bao's strength had reached the ultimate realm. However, he was easily destroyed by Chu Fengmian. From the sky, Emperor Bao's figure could no longer be seen, leaving only a pool of blood essence. Collect. Chu Fengmian grabbed with his hand and devoured all of the blood essence left by Emperor Bao. Then, he left without looking back. Chapter 930. In a mountain range of the House of Storms, a man was sitting calmly on top of the mountain range. Beside the man, one side was cold and the other side was hot. These two spiritual energies were constantly emitted. The surrounding mountain range was divided into two. One side was extremely hot, while the other was extremely cold. This was a strange scene that had never appeared in the House of Storms. This man was Chu Fengmian. 4 days. Chu Fengmian was in this mountain range, motionless, comprehending the magic of the ice and fire divine body. An innate divine body also needed to be developed countless times before one could comprehend its true power. It was the same for Chu Fengmian's ice and fire divine body. In just 4 days, Chu Fengmian had a deeper understanding of the ice and fire divine body. Beside Chu Fengmian, Luo Shi had been waiting quietly. She was also closing her eyes to comprehend the various things in the House of Storms. A battle of life and death was extremely helpful for a martial artist. It was enough to break through and comprehend a new realm. It's about time. The moment the sky above the House of Storms began to tear, Chu Fengmian slowly opened his eyes. 7 days had passed. It was time for the House of Storms to close. Chu Fengmian slowly stood up from the mountain range. At a glance, there was almost no spiritual energy emitted from Chu Fengmian's body. However, he could feel a kind of invisible pressure from it. Although there was no change in Chu Fengmian's realm, he was much more powerful than before he had entered the House of Storms after condensing the Ice and Fire Divine Body. The Ice and Fire Divine Body is indeed magical. Every time the 5 Primal Emperor's art forms a divine body, it will become many times stronger. I have only formed 2 of them now. If I were to form all 5 of them, how terrifying would it be? Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. The art of 5 Chaos Emperors was enough to condense the 5 Elements Divine Body. Once the 5 Elements Divine Body was condensed, it would return to the Chaos and condense the Chaos Divine Body. The Chaos Divine Body was an existence that surpassed the Celestial Divine Body. Since the creation of the art of 5 Chaos Emperors, no one had truly condensed the Chaos Divine Body. If Chu Fengmian could condense it, he would be the first person to walk the path of the art of 5 Chaos Emperors. He would even surpass the existence who created the art of 5 Chaos Emperors. Unfortunately, condensing the 5 Elements Divine Body was only a legend, a guess. If Chu Fengmian was able to do so, he would have truly made history. Let's not talk about the difficulties involved. Just the amount of divine stones needed to condense it is simply impossible to find in the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian could not help but sigh. It was impossible to find godstones in the 9 realms. They could only go to the outer realms. They could only be found in the boundless outer space. Luo Shi, you're about to break through to the next level, right? Chu Fengmian said as he looked at Luo Shi, who was slowly waking up. Luo Shi's level was already at the limit of the heart-tempering realm. She was only 1 step away from entering the destiny realm and becoming a ruler. Now that she had obtained such a large piece of saint-grade spirit stone, in addition to the life and death battle she had experienced in the House of Storms this time, she could not help but feel relieved. With Luo Shi's aptitude, breaking through was no longer a difficult thing. That's right, but I have to return to the 6 Paths Demon Gate. Luo Shi looked at Chu Fengmian and suddenly said, If I want to break through, I have to return to the 6 Paths Demon Gate. My inheritance comes from the 6 Paths Demon Gate. I have to return to the 6 Paths Demon Gate and take everything that belongs to me. You want to return to the 6 Paths Demon Gate? Chu Fengmian could not help but frown when he heard Luo Shi's words. Luo Shi's return to the 6 Paths Demon Gate could be said to be an extremely dangerous matter. Chu Fengmian did not want Luo Shi to take the risk. But what about your situation? Although the 6 Paths Demon Gate is dangerous, I have to return. If I don't, I will never be able to break through to the next level. Luo Shi looked at Chu Fengmian with gentleness in her eyes. Don't worry. After all, I'm the Supreme Lord of the Succubus sect. Even if they want to deal with me, it won't be that easy. Once I obtain the inheritance, I will leave immediately and meet up with you. All right. Chu Fengmian thought for a moment and nodded. Luo Shi's strength came from the Succubus sect of the 6 Paths Demon Gate. She was different from Chu Fengmian. She had to return to the 9 Paths Demon Gate in order to break through to the next level. I'll leave the Kanglin Immortal Armor to you. If you encounter any danger, you can call for me. I will definitely save you. As Chu Fengmian spoke, he took out the Kanglin Immortal Armor from his empty ring. The Kanglin Immortal Armor was not very useful to Chu Fengmian. Now that he had the protection of the Divine Tree, his body was extremely tough. If even his Divine Tree protection was broken, then the Kanglin Immortal Armor wouldn't be of much use. It was better to give it to Luo Shi so that she could protect herself. The Kanglan immortal armor. Luo Shi was pleasantly surprised when she heard Chu Fengmian's words. Especially when she saw Chu Fengmian giving the Kanglan immortal armor to her, it was enough to prove how much Chu Fengmian cared about her. Luo Shi did not decline, and kept the Kanglan immortal armor. She poured a drop of blood essence into it and began to refine it. Gradually, it merged into her body. If she wanted to return to the Six Paths Demon Gate, she would definitely encounter some dangers. With the help of the Kanglan immortal armor, it would be much easier. Once the Kanglan immortal armor was refined, it would become invisible and hide by Luo Shi's side. It was only when Luo Shi was in danger that he would suddenly appear to help her block the danger. This is the map of the Six Paths Demon Gate. Luo Shi thought for a while, and suddenly, a jade talisman was sent into Chu Fengmian's mind. Suddenly, a map appeared in Chu Fengmian's mind. This map recorded a small world in the endless void. This was where the Six Paths Demon Gate was located. The Six Paths Demon Gate has been hiding in the endless void all this time. No wonder the people from the 7 major sects couldn't find them. Chu Fengmian was surprised when he saw the map. The lair of the Six Paths Demon Gate was really well hidden. It was hidden in the depths of the void. Without this map, even Chu Fengmian would find it extremely difficult to search for them. You have to be careful. The Demon Emperor will also participate in the 9 Regions Genius battle. The Demon Emperor's strength is extraordinarily terrifying. You have to be extremely careful. Luo Shi reminded Chu Fengmian before she left. Then, the two of them were sent out of the Kanglan Palace and flew in 2 different directions. Chapter 931. I didn't expect that even the Demon Emperor would want to participate in the 9 Regions Genius tournament. In the central region, Chu Fengmian left the House of Storms and continued to travel through the central region. Although the 9 Regions Genius battle was a grand event, someone like the Demon Emperor shouldn't be participating in it. After all, the Demon Emperor had a lofty status. Given his status, he shouldn't be bothered to participate in the 9 Regions Genius tournament. One of the reasons why the 9 Regions Genius tournament was able to attract so many warriors to participate was because of the outstanding performance of the 9 Regions Genius tournament. It was very likely that the 7 great sects would extend an olive branch to them and try to rope them in. To most cultivators, this was something they could only dream of. Therefore, most of the martialists who participated in the 9 Regions Genius tournament had this intention. They wanted to display their skills and make a name for themselves in the 9 Regions Genius tournament. As for the other reason, it was because the champion of the 9 Regions Genius battle would obtain a treasure. This treasure was jointly given out by the 7 great sections. In the 9 regions, it was definitely a treasure that countless patriarchs and sovereigns would fight over. There would also be many martialists who would come for this treasure. However, these 2 points did not have much meaning to the Demon Emperor. The first was to join one of the 7 great sections. How was that possible for the Demon Emperor? The second was to obtain the final treasure of the 9 Regions Genius tournament. Given the Demon Emperor's status, he had all kinds of treasures. Even if it was something that other sovereigns coveted, it was nothing to the Demon Emperor. He had the entire Six Paths Demon sect under his control, so he could obtain any treasure he wanted. Unless, of course, the treasures from the 9 Regions Geniuses battle were extraordinary. Let's go take a look first. It would be a good thing if I could exchange blows with the Demon Emperor. Chu Fengmian sneered. Previously, Chu Fengmian had exchanged blows with the Demon Emperor in the Returning Ruins Heaven. At that time, Chu Fengmian had taken advantage of the situation. He had killed the Battle Demon Supremacy and the Lone Demon Supremacy in the hands of the Demon Emperor. However, Chu Fengmian had only fought with a doppelganger of the Demon Emperor. In terms of strength, that doppelganger had surpassed Chu Fengmian. This was because they had fought in the Heavenly Feather Divine region. As the master of the Heavenly Feather Palace, Chu Fengmian had a natural advantage in the heavenly feather divine region. Even so, Chu Fengmian was barely able to fight the Devil Emperor's clone. The Devil Emperor had retreated because Chu Fengmian was in the heavenly feather godland. There was no way he could kill Chu Fengmian. Otherwise, if the battle continued, Chu Fengmian would be the one to lose. Although Chu Fengmian wouldn't die, he would lose without a doubt. However, things would be different if Chu Fengmian were to fight the Demon Emperor again. Here we go. Chu Fengmian had condensed the ice-fire divine body, and his strength had skyrocketed. Even if he encountered the Devil Emperor, Chu Fengmian would defeat him sooner or later. The demon monarch of the Six Paths Demon Gate was a peerless genius. Chu Fengmian was determined to trample him under his feet. Looks like this 9 regions genius battle won't be boring. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. His figure continued to fly in the middle region. Soon, the scenery around him started to become familiar. Is this the ancient city of Ningzhou? Unknowingly, Chu Fengmian came to the ancient city of Ningzhou. The last time Chu Fengmian came from the northern region, he came directly to the ancient city of Ningzhou. This time, he came again. There seems to be a teleportation formation of the ancient Colosseum in the ancient city of Ningzhou. It can directly go to the ancient Colosseum. Chu Fengmian recalled that Gu Jin, the second daughter of the Gu family, seemed to have told Chu Fengmian this at that time. Let's go and take a look. Thinking of this, Chu Fengmian's body moved and directly fell into the ancient city of Ningzhou. The layers of restrictions set up in the ancient city of Ningzhou were enough to stop an ordinary emperor. However, in front of Chu Fengmian, they were treated as nothing. He didn't care about these restrictions at all and swaggered in. None of the restrictions could detect Chu Fengmian's presence and trigger to stop him. "Senior, welcome to the Gu family." A voice suddenly sounded from Chu Fengmian's side. This voice was slightly surprised, but it was full of politeness. Chu Fengmian silently fell into the Gu family's residence in the ancient city of Ningzhou. It wasn't until Chu Fengmian showed up that a strand of spiritual awareness suddenly sensed his existence. "Patriarch Gu, we haven't seen each other for half a month. Don't you remember me?" Chu Fengmian heard this voice and said with a smile. The owner of this voice was the patriarch of the Gu family. "This voice, you're Chu Fengmian?" When the patriarch of the Gu family heard Chu Fengmian's words, he was stunned at first, but then he realized that the voice seemed to be somewhat familiar. When he heard Chu Fengmian call himself Chu Fengmian, he immediately thought of Chu Fengmian's identity. He couldn't hide the surprise in his voice. He suddenly appeared and looked at Chu Fengmian as if he had seen a ghost. "Young Master Jiuyu, when did you return to the ancient city of Ningzhou?" The patriarch of the Gu family asked, unable to hide his surprise. The last time he saw Chu Fengmian, he felt the terror of Chu Fengmian's strength. However, with his realm, it was enough to suppress Chu Fengmian. This time, Chu Fengmian actually came to the Gu family without a sound. Even the patriarch of the Gu family did not notice Chu Fengmian's trace. Chu Fengmian's strength was not inferior to a ruler's. Therefore, when the patriarch of the Gu family suddenly noticed that someone had come to their residence, he thought that a ruler had arrived. He did not expect that person to be Chu Fengmian. "I just came here. It's on the way," Chu Fengmian said casually. "The people from the 6 demonic sects shouldn't be attacking the ancient city of Ningzhou anymore, right? The people from the 6 demonic sects have already left the surroundings of the ancient city of Ningzhou." The patriarch of the Gu family looked at Chu Fengmian for a long time before he asked in surprise, "Young Master Chu, your realm?" "Of course, I've already broken through. Thank you, Patriarch Gu. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been able to collect all the sacred herbs. It's all thanks to that sacred pill that I finally broke through," Chu Fengmian said with a smile. His current realm was no longer something that the patriarch of the Gu family could see. No matter how the patriarch of the Gu family looked, Chu Fengmian's realm was only nothingness. Chu Fengmian's realm was still on the 5th step of the life and death steps, which was the god martial realm, which was slightly lower than the patriarch of the Gu family's heart refining realm. However, Chu Fengmian's true strength was enough to easily kill a ruler. Even a ruler could not see Chu Fengmian's realm, let alone the patriarch of the Gu family. Chapter 932. What terrifying strength! I didn't expect this person to have such terrifying strength after just breaking through the life and death stage. The Gu clan head felt the terrifying aura emitted from Chu Fengmian's body and couldn't help but exclaim. Although Chu Fengmian's body didn't emit much terrifying spiritual energy, he could feel an invisible pressure just by standing beside him. Even without moving, it was enough to make the Gu clan head feel an invisible pressure. This was simply far beyond the Gu clan head's level. I wonder what level young Master Chu's current strength has reached? The Gu clan head suddenly asked. Chu Fengmian was a little surprised by the Gu clan head's question, but he still replied. Please be careful, Gu clan head. The instant he opened his mouth, Chu Fengmian faintly mobilized his spiritual energy, turning it into a terrifying pressure that directly enveloped the Gu clan head. The Gu clan head's mind suddenly turned blank under this pressure, and his face was filled with fear. Although Chu Fengmian withdrew his pressure in an instant, it was still enough to make the Gu clan head stunned for a moment. How terrifying! This person's strength has really reached a terrifying level. This pressure is no different from an emperor's. The Gu clan head was shocked. Just this pressure alone was enough to make him unable to resist. The Gu clan head was one of the most powerful figures among the ancestors. Just his pressure alone was enough to make him unable to resist. Only a ruler would be able to do all of this. If this person were to take action, it might be enough to save Jiuyu this time, but... The Gu clan head sighed inwardly, and his eyes revealed a bit of hesitation. Gu clan head, what trouble have you encountered? Chu Fengmian remained calm and suddenly thought of something. Where's Miss Jiuyu? Why isn't she in Ning Province Ancient City? When Chu Fengmian arrived at Ning Province Ancient City, he had already discovered that Gu Jiuyu wasn't there. Originally, Chu Fengmian didn't think much of it. But now, looking at the Gu clan head's appearance, there must be some secrets behind it. This trouble is related to Jiuyu. The head of the Gu family looked at Chu Fengmian and slowly opened his mouth. A few days ago, a young master of the Tianjian sect suddenly came to the ancient city of Ningzhou. He wanted to purchase a batch of elixirs, but he suddenly saw Jiuyu and wanted to marry her as his concubine. Oh? Isn't this a good thing? Why is the Gu family head unhappy? Chu Fengmian was slightly surprised when he heard the Gu family head's words. He was a young master of the Tianjian sect. Anyone who could become a young master of the Tianjian sect was at least one of the top geniuses of the younger generation in the Tianjian sect. With the Gu family's status, if Gu Jiuyu married this young master, it would naturally rise with the tide. But now, looking at the Gu family head's intentions, it didn't seem to be the case. Young Master Chu, you might not know this, but that young master has taken in countless concubines. He has over 1,000 wives and concubines. Furthermore, what he cultivates is a type of cultivation Tao. The patriarch of the Gu clan said with a troubled expression. That young master only wants to take Jiuyu's cultivation Tao. In less than 3 months, Jiuyu will die. A few days ago, that young master has already sent a betrothal gift. He said that he will take Jiuyu away in 2 days. This old man is incompetent, so I can only send Jiuyu to another city to hide for a while. The cultivation Tao? People of the Tianjian sect actually cultivate this kind of demonic cultivation Tao. After hearing the Gu family head's words, Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed a bit of coldness. The cultivation Tao was extremely rare in the current 9 regions, but Chu Fengmian knew that it was a type of demonic cultivation Tao. Some male warriors cultivated by taking other women's cultivation Tao for their own use. The most ruthless part was that after the cultivation Tao was taken, the woman would be lucky enough to have half a life left. She would be no different from an ordinary person. If the cultivation Tao was more ruthless, she would directly die. This was an out-and-out demonic cultivation Tao. Chu Fengmian did not expect that the Tianjian sect, which prided itself on the righteous path, actually had a disciple who cultivated this kind of demonic cultivation Tao. Since I've come to this ancient city of Ningzhou, it's fate. I won't let Miss Gu Jin be taken by that young master. Chu Fengmian suddenly opened his mouth. Who is that young master? What's his background? That young master is called Jian Zongjie. He's a genius of the Tianjian sect. At such a young age, he has already reached the heart-refining realm. The patriarch of the Gu clan hurriedly said. Although this person is not easy to deal with, this old man can deal with him for a while. However, his master is a supreme elder of the Tianjian sect. He's an emperor, Emperor Yan. An Emperor Yan had actually appeared. This Jian Zongjie's background was indeed extraordinary. The corner of Chu Fengmian's mouth curled into a cold smile. Very good. Now, in order for his divine tree to grow, it needed the essence and blood of an emperor. Originally, Chu Fengmian did not know where to get the essence and blood of emperors. Now, it seemed that one by one, they had delivered themselves to his doorstep. I see. Patriarch Gu, you should go and bring Miss Gu Jin back. Chu Fengmian looked at the patriarch of the Gu clan and said calmly. But, I heard that Emperor Yan, who is behind Jian Zongjie, will come personally. The patriarch of the Gu clan said nervously. So what? He's just an Emperor Yan. Since he's here, I'll offer his blood to my sword. Chu Fengmian said casually. Go ahead. A mere Emperor Yan is not worthy of my attention. A mere Emperor Yan is not worthy of my attention. Hearing Chu Fengmian's arrogant words, the patriarch of the Gu clan did not dare to refute. Chu Fengmian's aura was too terrifying. So much so that he did not even have the courage to refute Chu Fengmian's words. Okay, I'll go and call Jiner back. The patriarch of the Gu clan hurriedly threw out a jade talisman. The two of them sat in the palace. Not long after, a stream of light landed steadily in the Gu clan. It was Gu Jin. The last time they met, Gu Jin's strength had improved, reaching the 9th level of life and death realm. In this way, she was not far from breaking through the life and death steps and becoming a first-generation old ancestor. Young Master Chu. Gu Jin came from afar and saw Chu Fengmian. Feeling the terrifying aura of Chu Fengmian, she could not help but feel a little fearful. The last time she saw Chu Fengmian, she was shocked by his strength. Today, she saw that Chu Fengmian's strength was much more terrifying than the last time she came to Ning Province ancient city. Gu Jin, you actually came back. It seems like you've finally decided to marry young Master Jian. Chapter 933. The figure of a young man slowly walked in from outside the palace. It was Gu Quan, whom he had met once in the Ning region ancient city. Gu Quan, what are you doing here? Seeing Gu Quan's arrival, the Gu family head's eyes flashed with anger. This time, young Master Jian wanted to marry Gu Jin, and this was related to Gu Quan. Although he was the Gu family head, he could not control the entire Gu family. Gu Quan was nurtured by the elders of the Gu family. Even if he was angry, he could not kill Gu Quan. Family head, I'm just here to give you a piece of advice. Young Master Jian will be here today to propose marriage. Family head and Gu Jin, please serve him well. Gu Quan glanced to the side and saw Chu Fengmian standing there. Gu Quan said coldly. Also, this is an internal matter of our Gu family. Family head, please do not bring in outsiders to prevent young Master Jian from misunderstanding. 3 elders. As Gu Quan spoke, 3 old men slowly walked in from outside and stood behind Gu Quan. Those 3 old men were all in the heart refinement realm. Although they were a bit inferior to the Gu family's head, when the 3 of them joined hands, their strength greatly surpassed the Gu family's head. Not good, young Master Chu. These 3 are the grand elders of our Gu family. They are supporters of Gu Quan. Gu Jin quietly transmitted her voice to Chu Fengmian. She looked a little nervous. 3 Grand Elders, why have you come here? When the head of the Gu clan saw the appearance of the 3 Grand Elders, his eyes revealed some fear as he spoke. We're just here to remind family head not to do anything stupid, an old man slowly said. He looked at Chu Fengmian and sized him up for a moment before he suddenly spoke. Lad, who are you? Why are you in the Gu family? I'm just a friend of Miss Gu Jin. I'm just passing by the Gu family, Chu Fengmian said casually. There was no expression in his eyes. Friend? I don't think so. You saved Gu Jin this time and came to our Gu family to ask for some benefit. That's already written off. Our Gu family has nothing to do with you. When Gu Quan heard Chu Fengmian's words, he suddenly sneered loudly. Today's matter is an internal affair of the Gu clan. As an outsider, you have no right to interfere. Elders, I suspect that this man is colluding with the 6 Paths Demon Gate. He must be plotting against the Gu clan. The family head and Miss Gu Jin have been deceived by him. Elders, please subdue him and lock him up in the prison before interrogating him. That's right. This kid's background is unknown. He doesn't look like someone from our Ningzhou ancient city. He must be plotting something against our Gu family. One of the Grand Elders suddenly spoke. Let's capture him first. When the time comes, I'll leave it to young Master Jian. Good. Brat, since you don't want to explain yourself, then we'll capture you and interrogate you properly. Attack. The moment the 3 Grand Elders spoke, they attacked at the same time. 3 withered arms suddenly grabbed at Chu Fengmian. The 3 arms stacked on top of each other as their strength merged into one. They grabbed the space around Chu Fengmian. They wanted to capture Chu Fengmian's body and seal all of his spiritual energy. Young Master Chu, this is bad. This is our Gu clan's combined attack technique. The 3 Grand Elders are enough to capture an ordinary Emperor Realm expert. Gu Jin said nervously when she saw the 3 Grand Elders taking action. However, before she could finish her words, the change in the scene left her dumbfounded. 3 old men, are you courting death? Chu Fengmian's eyes turned cold. Chu Fengmian was too lazy to get involved in the internal affairs of the Gu clan. However, since they had set their sights on Chu Fengmian, they were courting death. What kind of combined attack technique is this? Capturing an Emperor Realm expert? All of you break. Chu Fengmian waved his sleeves and a surge of spiritual energy rushed out. A dragon's roar suddenly resounded. In the face of this dragon roar, the 3 withered arms were all sent flying. With a cracking sound, all of them broke apart. Chu Fengmian did not use any power for this attack. Just the strength of his physical body was enough to directly break through the combined attack of the 3 Grand Elders of the Gu clan. Gu Quan, who was standing at the side, did not expect this to happen. He had suffered a loss at Chu Fengmian's hands once. This time, he called the 3 elders over to give Chu Fengmian a show of strength and teach him a lesson. However, he did not expect the 3 Grand Elders to be so weak in front of Chu Fengmian. Just one move was enough to break the 3 Grand Elders' combined attack. Not good. Quickly inform young Master Jian. This person must be a spy from the 6 Paths Demon Sect. He must be plotting something against the Gu clan. Young Master Jian, please come quickly and kill this man. One of the Grand Elders shouted in the sky. Die. Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold as he grabbed the Grand Elder's neck. The Grand Elder, who was full of arrogance just a moment ago, was now being choked by Chu Fengmian as if he was a chicken. He was almost out of breath. Young Master Chu, the Gu clan master, looked at Chu Fengmian as if he wanted to plead for mercy. However, Chu Fengmian took the initiative and spoke coldly. These pieces of trash are the cancer of the Gu clan. They will only cause trouble if they stay in the Gu clan. Today they must die. You don't have to care about them, Gu clan master. Chu Fengmian's words revealed a deep killing intent. Since these people dared to provoke Chu Fengmian, it was useless for anyone to plead for mercy. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the three Grand Elders panicked. However, they still did not believe that Chu Fengmian dared to kill them. Boy, we are now young Master Jian's men. If you dare to kill us, young Master Jian will not let you go. Let us go now. When young Master Jian comes, kneel down and apologize. This is your only chance to live. A Grand Elder even threatened Chu Fengmian in an arrogant manner. However, before he could finish his arrogant words, he saw Chu Fengmian's palm move. Abruptly, that Supreme Elder was directly crushed by Chu Fengmian's palm. Only a miserable scream was left in the sky. The Grand Elder was crushed to death by Chu Fengmian's hand. Chapter 934. And the two of you must die too. After killing one of their Grand Elders, Chu Fengmian's killing intent grew even stronger. When he killed people, he had always cut the weeds and eliminated the root. He had never left any trace of mercy. The head of the Gu family wanted to say something, but when he saw the ruthless killing intent in Chu Fengmian's eyes, he did not dare to open his mouth again. Head of the family, save us. The remaining two Grand Elders did not dare to doubt Chu Fengmian's words after seeing him crush one of their Grand Elders to death with their own eyes. Chu Fengmian had always said that he would kill without any hesitation. No one could stop him from killing the people he wanted to kill. Young Master Chu, Senior Chu, please let us go. We are willing to acknowledge you as our master and submit to you. The two Grand Elders hurriedly begged Chu Fengmian when they saw that begging the head of the Gu family was useless. Chu Fengmian's expression was as cold as before. You want to beg for mercy now? It's too late. Go to hell. Chu Fengmian said ruthlessly. This time, he announced the death of the two Grand Elders. Chu Fengmian's palm fell mercilessly. The bodies of the two Grand Elders began to swell crazily as if they were about to explode. Ah, kid. Just you wait, young Master Jian will definitely not let you go. Before they died, the two of them were still madly cursing. Young Master Jian? Soon, you will be able to meet young Master Jian. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a cold smile. Young Master Jian, you will all die. These three old fellows are dead. Consider it as cleaning up the Gu family. After killing the three Grand Elders, Chu Fengmian slowly descended into the palace. The head of the Gu family could not help but smile bitterly when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. Thank you, young Master Chu. Don't worry. I have killed so many people from the Gu family. Of course, I will give you some compensation. Gu Jin, come here. Chu Fengmian looked at the head of the Gu family and suddenly laughed. He said to Gu Jin, Yes. Upon hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Gu Jin walked over to Chu Fengmian's side without hesitation. There was a ball of pure essence blood in Chu Fengmian's palm. It was the essence blood of the three Grand Elders. A drop of Chu Fengmian's own essence blood was added to it, causing it to shine with a dazzling golden light. I've killed 3 of your Gu family's ancestors. Now, I'll return one to you. As Chu Fengmian spoke, he suddenly threw a palm strike at Gu Jin. However, this palm strike did not pose any threat. Instead, the essence blood in his palm was directly injected into Gu Jin's body. The aura of the ancient brocade body started to swell frantically. His entire body was undergoing earth-shattering changes due to the refinement of the essence blood. Transcend life and death. In Gu Jin's body, a shackle that had been restraining her was suddenly released. It was the bottleneck that transcended life and death. Gu Jin's cultivation level suddenly surpassed the life and death steps, and continued to climb until he reached the 4th step of the life and death steps, the unblemished realm. Only then did his aura stabilize. With a wave of his hand, Gu Jin's cultivation level underwent earth-shattering changes. I've surpassed the life and death steps and become an ancestor? Gu Jin felt the changes in his body and simply could not believe it. In the blink of an eye, it was enough to make a life and death realm martial artist directly become an ancestor. Moreover, it directly reached the unblemished realm. This was simply the kind of thing that could only be done by supreme ancestors in the legend. But now, it was done in front of everyone alive. What kind of technique is this? What level has this person's strength reached? Gu Jin. Seeing this scene, the Gu family's patriarch's heart was in a perilous situation. His cultivation level was much higher than Gu Jin's, and he was also much more knowledgeable. Naturally, he knew how terrifying the technique was to be able to achieve this. Not to mention some emperors, even a quasi-supreme ancestor could not do it. Only a supreme ancestor who had truly stepped into the immortal realm could do all this. Currently, Chu Fengmian's cultivation level was not even at the emperor realm, but his technique was comparable to that of a supreme ancestor. This was definitely something to marvel at, especially when the Gu family's patriarch transcended the life and death steps. It was extremely difficult. No one knew how many methods he had to use to achieve all this. But now, Gu Jin did it with ease. This person can only be roped in. Now, even the 7 major sects can't deal with him. As long as we wait for him to grow, he may even step into the peak of the 9 regions. The Gu family's patriarch's eyes flickered. He secretly made up his mind that no matter what, he would stand on Chu Fengmian's side. Not only because of Chu Fengmian's current strength, but also because of Chu Fengmian's terrifying growth. In just half a month, the Gu family's patriarch had witnessed Chu Fengmian's growth with his own eyes. He did not even dare to think about how far Chu Fengmian could go in the future. Therefore, no matter what, he had to stand on Chu Fengmian's side. Gu family's patriarch, how is it? Chu Fengmian sat on the chair, drinking tea by himself, and said with a smile, "Thank you, young Master Chu. Our Gu clan will never forget young Master Chu's kindness. As long as young Master Chu has any instructions in the future, as long as young Master Chu passes the word, our Gu clan will definitely go through water and tread on fire without hesitation," the Gu family's patriarch hurriedly said, almost kneeling down in front of Chu Fengmian. And, seeing the Gu family's patriarch's performance, Chu Fengmian's heart was extremely satisfied. Although for the current Chu Fengmian, there was indeed no need for the Gu family's help. But whether Chu Fengmian needed it or not was one thing, whether they were willing to do it or not was another. Gu Jin, your current realm is still unstable. Once you stabilize it, it will be very easy to break through. Chu Fengmian looked at Gu Jin and said, if Chu Fengmian was willing, he could directly help Gu Jin break through to the 6th step of the life and death steps, the heart-refining realm. With the blood essence of 3 great ancestors in the heart-refining realm and a drop of Chu Fengmian's blood essence, it was naturally easy to do all of this. Chu Fengmian did not do so. He only laid a stable foundation for Gu Jin, although he was still a little inferior to those true monstrous geniuses. However, compared to most of the disciples of the 7 great sects, Gu Jin's aptitude was 1 level higher. It was not impossible for him to step into the Emperor realm in the future. Yes, Gu Jin is willing to follow young master for the rest of his life. Gu Jin looked at Chu Fengmian and directly knelt on the ground, saying respectfully, "All right, get up." Chu Fengmian waved his hand and brought Gu Jin up. Then, he pointed at Gu Quan, who was already frightened, and said coldly, Chapter 935. Yes, sir. Gu Jin looked at Gu Quan, who had been sealed by his spiritual power and could not escape. Her eyes were full of killing intent. Whether it was the danger she encountered when she went to kill the blood sword demon Venerable, or this time, she was forced to marry young Master Jian. It was all Gu Quan's doing. Looking at Gu Quan, Gu Jin did not hesitate at all. She suddenly cut off Gu Quan's head with her sword, and then smashed Gu Quan's body with her palm. After doing all this, Chu Fengmian felt that Gu Jin's aura had stabilized a lot. She was indescribably happy. All her opponents had died in her hands. For any martial artist, it was a joyous thing to die in her own hands. Gu family head, young Master Jian should be here soon. Clean up and lure him in first. Then, I'll deal with him. Chu Fengmian said calmly to Gu family head beside her. Yes. The head of the Gu family hurriedly cleaned up the mess at the scene. Now, he no longer had any doubts about Chu Fengmian's strength. So what if he was an emperor? With Chu Fengmian's current means that were comparable to Ancestor Wu, dealing with a few emperors would not be easy. 2 hours later. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure appeared in the sky above Ningzhou ancient city. Then, the space was directly torn apart. From this torn space, 2 figures slowly walked out. These 2 figures were an old man and a young man. The young man was handsome, but his eyes were as vicious as snakes and scorpions. These 2 people were young Master Jian Zongjie, and the person behind him, his master, Emperor Yen. The 2 of them directly descended. When the 2 of them arrived at Ningzhou ancient city, they did not pay attention to the restrictions at all. Instead, Emperor Yen directly took action and tore the restrictions at Ningzhou ancient city apart with a flick of his finger. This allowed the 2 of them to step into Ningzhou ancient city. Ningzhou ancient city. It's a pity that the Gu family occupied such a city. Jian Zongjie looked at the bustling Ningzhou ancient city below and sneered. This time, I'm going to marry the most outstanding girl in the Gu family. As a concubine, it's their great fortune. If the Gu family knows what's good for them, they should submit to me. I didn't expect the Gu family head to be so stubborn and still want to resist me. I'm sorry to trouble Master this time. A mere Gu family, who doesn't even have an emperor, dares to resist our Tianjian sect. Looks like anyone who dares to challenge our 7 sects. The Smoke Emperor, who was standing beside Jian Zongjie, said coldly as he surveyed his surroundings. Today I have personally come here. If the Gu family does not give me an explanation, this matter will not end here. Master, don't be angry. When we arrive at the Gu clan, we will naturally have a way to take over the Gu clan. The Gu clan occupies the ancient city of Ning province and is extremely wealthy. If we obtain the Gu clan's wealth, we will be able to strengthen our sect. Jian Zongjie said with a laugh. The Gu family doesn't deserve such an ancient city of Ningzhou. The 2 figures paused in the air for a moment, before directly descending into the Gu clan. At the same time, from the Gu clan, an enormous pressure instantly enveloped them. The moment the countless disciples of the Gu family felt this pressure, they all knelt down on the ground and started trembling. A bunch of trash. Jian Zongjie glared at the disciples of the Gu family and roared. Gu family head, come out and meet us. Young Master Jian is here. You must be Senior Emperor Yen. Not long later, the head of the Gu clan flew out. Seeing the 2 of them, he respectfully opened his mouth and spoke. The 2 of you, please withdraw your oppressive might. My Gu family's disciples are weak and cannot withstand such oppressive might. Seeing the Gu family head being so respectful, Jian Zongjie and Emperor Yen retracted their pressure. When Jian Zongjie saw that only the head of the Gu clan had appeared, he could not help but frown as he spoke. Where's Miss Gu Jin? Why isn't she here? Jin knew about young Master Jian's arrival and hurriedly arranged a banquet in the palace. Please forgive her for not being able to receive you, the Gu family head said without batting an eyelid. Please come to one of the palaces. Our Gu clan has already prepared a banquet and is waiting for the 2 of you to take your seats. All right. Jian Zongjie and Emperor Yen nodded their heads and followed the Gu family head into the palace. In the palace, Chu Fengmian was already seated at the banquet table, drinking tea quietly. Even when he saw Jian Zongjie and the Smoke Emperor arrive, Chu Fengmian's expression did not change at all. He continued to drink his tea leisurely. Jian Zongjie and the Yen Emperor both looked at Chu Fengmian, who was an anomaly. Their eyes were filled with hostility. Jian Zongjie asked unhappily, Gu family head, who is this person? Why is there someone else at the banquet today? Oh, this is a young disciple of the Gu family. He is inexperienced and does not know who you are. Please forgive him. The head of the Gu clan slowly opened his mouth and said, "Young Master Jian, Jin has been waiting for a long time. Please take a seat." Jian Zongjie and Emperor Yan nodded their heads when they heard this. They ignored Chu Fengmian and sat down at the banquet table. To the two of them, a mere ancestor of the god martial realm was no different from an ant. They would not take it to heart. "Patriarch Gu, are you looking down on our heavenly sword sect by making all sorts of excuses to stop me? Or are you saying that I, Jian Zongjie, am not good enough for your daughter?" Jian Zongjie suddenly looked at the head of the Gu clan after he sat down and suddenly opened his mouth to speak. "This time around, my master has personally come not only for the sake of this marriage proposal. Instead, he has a matter that he wishes to discuss with the Gu family's head." "May I know the reason why the Emperor Yan is here?" The patriarch of the Gu clan pretended to be terrified as he hurriedly asked. The Yan emperor spoke slowly. His voice was extremely old, but his tone was like an order. There was no difference between him and Lin Fan. "It's simple. I want the Gu family to join our Tianjian sect. From now on, Ningzhou City will be under the control of our Tianjian sect. Now that the 6 demonic sects have suddenly appeared in the 9 regions, everyone is panicking. Many cities have been taken over by them. Although the ancient city of Ningzhou is not in danger yet, we have to take precautions. Therefore, all the cities will be controlled by the 7 great sects, including the ancient city of Ningzhou." Chapter 936. Emperor Yan's words didn't sound so harsh on the phone, but in reality, he wanted the Gu family to hand over the ancient city of Ningzhou. The ancient city of Ningzhou was the foundation of the Gu family. This was no different from a bandit's behavior. If the Gu family lost the ancient city of Ningzhou, the decline of the Gu family would be inevitable. The more the Gu family heard Emperor Yan's words, the colder the expression of the Gu family became. At this moment it was extremely gloomy. However, he didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at Chu Fengmian. Jian Zongjie and Emperor Yan were also looking at the Gu family's master with cold smiles, waiting for his answer. When did the people of the Tianjian sect become a bunch of bandits? It seems that after so many years, the nature of the Tianjian sect hasn't changed. They are still a bunch of bandits. In this silent place, a calm voice suddenly broke the silence. This voice didn't belong to the Gu family's master. It belonged to Chu Fengmian, who had been sitting at the side and drinking tea. Gu Jin stood beside Chu Fengmian, calmly serving Chu Fengmian tea. "Brat, who are you? A mere Gu clan disciple. What qualifications do you have to speak to us? Get out!" Jian Zongjie shouted angrily when he heard Chu Fengmian speak. In his opinion, Chu Fengmian was just a disciple of the Gu family. He didn't even have the right to talk to him. Jian Zongjie shouted angrily at the Gu family's master. "Gu family's master, it seems that the Gu family really wants to become the enemy of the Tianjian sect. Let's throw this arrogant brat out first before we can continue our discussion." The Gu family's master remained silent when he heard Jian Zongjie's words. He didn't seem to want to teach Chu Fengmian a lesson. He just stood quietly at the side. At this moment, there was no need for him to speak. Become the enemy of the Tianjian sect? What does it matter? Chu Fengmian shook his head. The number of Sky Sword sect disciples that he had killed was almost uncountable. He had even killed a ruler of the Sky Sword sect. This sentence was said casually. It was as if he didn't care at all. Where did this arrogant brat come from? Speaking such arrogant words. How dare you say that you want to make an enemy out of the Tianjian sect in front of me? Very well. If I don't kill a few ants, people nowadays really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Jian Zongjie was furious when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. Since when did anyone dare to challenge the authority of the Tianjian sect? Especially an ancestor of the divine martial layer. In his eyes, the ancestor of the divine martial layer was nothing more than an ant. Impudent. Kneel. The spiritual power in Jian Zhongjie's body suddenly erupted, and he suddenly pressed his palm towards Chu Fengmian. This tyrannical force pressed on Chu Fengmian's body, forcing him to kneel on the ground. With his strength, he could be said to be invincible among warriors of the same realm. He simply didn't put Chu Fengmian in his eyes when dealing with a warrior of the divine martial realm. However, when this spiritual power bombarded Chu Fengmian, it seemed to suddenly disappear. Chu Fengmian drank his tea casually. When he finished drinking his tea, Chu Fengmian slowly stood up. His eyes flashed with coldness. "You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I think it's you who dares to be arrogant in front of me." Chu Fengmian suddenly laughed. He moved his hand slightly and scattered all of Jian Zhongjie's spiritual power around him, bombarding Jian Zhongjie's chest. Puff! Jian Zhongjie's chest was bombarded on the spot. He took several steps back and spat out a mouthful of essence blood. His face was deathly pale. His eyes were full of disbelief. "Kneel!" Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and endless pressure enveloped Jian Zhongjie's body. Suddenly, Jian Zhongjie's internal organs were almost crushed by this terrifying pressure. Even his knees went soft. He couldn't bear the pressure and almost knelt on the ground. However, at this moment, a surge of spiritual power suddenly blocked in front of Jian Zhongjie and dissolved his spiritual power. The person who made this move was Emperor Yen, who was sitting at the side. In an instant, he appeared in front of Jian Zhongjie and blocked all of Chu Fengmian's spiritual power. "Junior, aren't you a little too ruthless? How dare you make a move in front of me? It seems like you're an expert hired by the Gu family. Unfortunately, an ancestor who isn't even an emperor is just an ant no matter how strong he is." Emperor Yen looked at Chu Fengmian and said slowly. Even he couldn't see through Chu Fengmian's current strength. However, there wasn't a trace of destiny's aura on Chu Fengmian's body. This meant that Chu Fengmian had yet to step into the destiny realm and become an emperor. An ancestor, no matter how strong he was nothing in front of an emperor. "Seeing that you have good potential, kneel down. As my slave, I can spare you this time." Emperor Yen looked at Chu Fengmian and said calmly. Hearing Emperor Yan's words, Chu Fengmian almost laughed out loud. It seemed like Jian Zhongjie didn't learn to be so arrogant from others. This Emperor Yen was even more arrogant. Once he made a move, he asked people to kneel down and submit. "An old man like you still dares to speak so arrogantly. Emperor Yen? Today, I made you unable to become an emperor and turned you into a piece of trash. How dare you ask me to kneel down? Break!" Chu Fengmian laughed loudly. The aura on his body rose rapidly. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and slapped Emperor Yen across the face. Chu Fengmian slapped Emperor Yen across the face. Slap! This crisp sound suddenly rang out in the palace. The Gu family's head and Gu Jin looked at this scene with their mouths agape. Emperor Yen was an emperor. Now, he had been slapped by Chu Fengmian. This was already a form of humiliation. As an emperor, he had an extremely high status in the Tianjian sect. When had the Emperor Yen, who was revered by tens of thousands, ever been humiliated like this? "Little bastard, you're courting death." Emperor Yen was so angry that his hair stood on end. A rainbow-colored gourd suddenly appeared in his hand and he opened it. From the rainbow-colored gourd, clouds of rainbow-colored smoke drifted out. This is the rainbow-colored god-slaying smoke. Any martial artist who is trapped in it will die without a doubt. However, little bastard, I won't let you die so quickly. I will torture you and make you beg for death. Emperor Yen roared angrily as he watched Chu Fengmian fall into the rainbow-colored god-slaying smoke. However, before he could finish his words, another shadow suddenly appeared from the rainbow-colored god-slaying smoke. Another slap was delivered. Chapter 937. The two slaps caused Emperor Yan's face to swell up like a pig's head. Emperor Yen wanted to gather his spiritual energy and recover quickly. However, no matter how hard he tried, The 2 slaps remained on his face and could not be healed. This humiliation was more painful than killing him. Little bastard! I want you dead! Emperor Yen roared crazily. His hair flew in the wind and he spat out blood essence. He was burning his own blood essence. The burning blood essence merged into the 7-colored god-slaying smoke. He did not want to torture Chu Fengmian anymore. He wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. Only by killing Chu Fengmian now would he be able to vent his anger. As his blood essence burned, the 7-colored god-slaying smoke spewed out from his 7-colored gourd and started to spin. Any existence in the 7-colored god-slaying smoke would be crushed. What 7-colored god-slaying smoke? You are all trash. Old man, aren't you arrogant? Then I will destroy your cultivation base first. Let's see how arrogant you can be in the future. Chu Fengmian stood in the middle of the 7-colored god-slaying smoke, allowing the storm to wash over him. A cold smile appeared on his face. Chu Fengmian made his move. With a thought, the battle dragon's claw swept across the sky in front of Chu Fengmian. The 7-colored god-slaying smoke was swept away by the battle dragon's claw. All of it turned into ashes. Even the 7-colored gourd started to vibrate violently under this power. Then it shattered. How is this possible? Master's 7-colored gourd was destroyed. How is this possible? Jian Zhongji's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets when he saw this scene. The 7-colored gourd was a heaven-grade spiritual artifact. A heaven-grade spiritual artifact was destroyed just like that. However, what happened next shocked him even more. Chu Fengmian broke through the 7-colored god-slaying smoke. His body flashed continuously and in an instant, he was in front of Emperor Yen. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed him. Emperor Yan's neck was tightly gripped by Chu Fengmian. No matter how hard Emperor Yen struggled, he could not break free. How is this possible? The famous Emperor Yen was defeated just like that? The Gu family's patriarch and Gu Jin, who were standing at the side, were equally dumbfounded. Emperor Yen was the famous emperor of the Tianjian sect. He fought many people in the Tian sect and was very famous. The rainbow-colored gourd was even more difficult to deal with. Ordinary sovereigns would not dare to go against Emperor Yen. However, such a grand character had actually been defeated so miserably by Chu Fengmian. He had even been hung up and beaten by Chu Fengmian in the palm of his hand. Damn it! Damn it! Little bastard! Impossible! How can I be defeated by an ancestor? This is impossible! Emperor Yen was still struggling madly as Chu Fengmian grabbed his neck. He simply could not believe that he had been defeated by an ancestor. This was something that he had never imagined. I am invincible. Emperor to Chu to break Chu to be Emperor he Chu. But in Chu Fengmian's eyes, this kind of struggle was futile and useless. You still want to struggle? Seems like you won't give up until I destroy your cultivation. Sky-devouring divine python, condense! Chu Fengmian pinched Emperor Yen. Suddenly, his mind moved. From Chu Fengmian's palm, a sky-devouring divine python condensed from sword intent. Under Chu Fengmian's control, the sky-devouring divine python drilled into Emperor Yan's body. It started to devour Emperor Yan's blood essence. Ah! Emperor Yen screamed in agony. Extracting his blood essence like this was as painful as extracting his soul. What Emperor Yen could not accept was that his realm was getting lower and lower as his blood essence was drained. Heavenly Fate Realm. Heart-refining realm. Soon, Emperor Yan's realm returned to Life and Death Realm and Divine Power Realm. Finally, he became an ordinary person without any spiritual power. His body had also aged. In such a state, the Smoke Emperor would definitely die within a few days. Chu Fengmian had purposely left a few drops of blood essence for Emperor Yen. Otherwise, Emperor Yen would be dead by now. However, it was a little boring to let Emperor Yen die so quickly. Alright, you and your disciple should kneel down now. Chu Fengmian released Emperor Yan. Emperor Yan's body seemed to have fallen apart as he knelt down in front of Chu Fengmian. Jian Zongjie had also lost his backing. He could no longer resist Chu Fengmian's power. At the same time, he knelt down in front of Chu Fengmian. After doing all this, the Gu clan's clan head and Gu Jin finally regained their senses. Everything that had happened was simply beyond their imagination, especially the Gu family head, who was already considered a powerhouse in the domain land. However, in front of an emperor, he could only kneel down like an ant. Looking at an emperor being crippled by Chu Fengmian and kneeling on the ground, he still felt like he was in a dream. After killing these two people, the Tianjian sect will definitely investigate. The Gu family head looked at the two people kneeling on the ground and said worriedly. Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid of the Tianjian sect, but he was. It doesn't matter. If the Tianjian sect comes to investigate, they will only know that I killed them. It has nothing to do with the Gu family. Chu Fengmian said casually. I will take them outside and kill them. This was also the reason why Chu Fengmian didn't kill them now. Jian Zongjie and Emperor Yan had a high status in the Tianjian sect. Now that they were dead, the Tianjian sect would definitely investigate. With the Tianjian sect's methods, it wouldn't be difficult to reconstruct their death. Therefore, Chu Fengmian didn't kill them now. He was waiting for them to be taken outside and killed. This way, the Gu family wouldn't be implicated. After all, Chu Fengmian had already killed many Tianjian sect disciples. 2 more wouldn't make a difference. Thank you, young master. The Gu family head hurriedly expressed his gratitude. It's nothing. By the way, does the ancient city of Ningzhou have any emperor blood essence? Chu Fengmian waved his hand. He suddenly thought of something and asked. Emperor blood essence of a demon god is also available. If Chu Fengmian wanted the tree of God to grow, he would need a large amount of emperor blood essence. It would be troublesome for him to kill them alone. After all, emperors like Emperor Yan who came to die were in the minority. Most of the emperors were in the secret realms of the Seven Sect. No matter how bold Chu Fengmian was, he couldn't go to the Seven Sects to kill. There was another way to obtain emperor blood essence, and that was to buy it. Although emperor blood essence was extremely rare in the 9 zones, it wasn't impossible to buy it. For some martial artists, emperor blood essence was even more effective than heaven-level spirit pills. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.